Good evening and welcome to the weekly Lawrence City Commission meeting. Just a note, we've experienced quite a weekend over Thanksgiving, lots of ice and a lot of time to be remind yourselves and to be concerned about your neighbors. A lot of people we saw slip and fall and take some tumbles. So, you know, be a good neighbor, check on your neighbors from time to time, make sure everybody's doing okay. It's awful easy to get hurt and somebody not find you for a couple of days. So just be heads up and watch out for one another. So anyway, I want to again welcome all of you for coming this evening. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving season. First item on the agenda is, since we don't have proclamations tonight, is the consent agenda, and all matters listed on the consent agenda will be considered under one motion, will be enacted by one motion. There'll be no separate discussion on those items, and if discussion is desired, that item will be removed from the consent agenda and will be considered separately. Are there any items on the consent agenda that a member of the commission would like to have removed for separate consideration?
Number 9.
9. Any other items that a member of the commission would like to have removed?
7A.
Okay, 7A. Matt, Stuart, got anything? Okay. Any items on the consent agenda that a member of the public would like to have removed for separate consideration? Okay, back to the commission. So item 7A is ordinance number 9181, which is a rezoning of approximately 2.96 acres located at 1501 Leonard Street from RS 7, which is residential, to district to limited industrial district. So we'll remove that. And item number 9 is receive a request from Menard Incorporated for economic development assistance to aid in establishing manufacturing site on 90 acres, and to refer this item to the Public and City Review Committee for recommendation, and to establish a January 5th, 2016 as the public hearing date on the request. So with the exception of item 7A and item number 9, and with the addition of claims to 287 vendors in the amount of $3,783,591.87, and also for 11 manual written checks in the amount of $16,815.30, and payroll in the amount of $2,002,790.06. I would entertain a motion for approval of the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
Motion made and second to approve the consent agenda with claims, and with the exception of items 7A and number 9, was made by Vice Mayor Soden, second by Commissioner Larson. Any other questions or comments? All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That item is passed 5-0. First item is item number 7A, again, ordinance number 9181, to rezone approximately 2.96 acres, 1501 Leonard Avenue from RS7 to IL, with conditions to limit certain uses. Vice Mayor, you had a question?
No, I didn't.
Oh, you had a question, I'm sorry.
Yeah, my question is, I don't know if it's a question, it's just that my concern is that we are attempting to rezone a residential area into a limited industrial area. And the project, from what I've read and understand of it, is that it's predominantly put together for the Sunrise Green project, which I think is a really good project for it. However, what goes along with that is what I have concerns about of a tofu factory, I believe, is going to be part of it, as well as a seed manufacturing plant, I think a small one. I'm concerned that whether this is really a good idea to zone, to change the zoning to this extreme in smack dab in the middle of a neighborhood.
Okay. Okay.
I'm not going to have actually a presentation, but I have some slides I will show you to answer that question. And right, the property is in a residential district, and as you'll see, the nursery has been in this location. It was developed in the mid-1920s. Its use is crop agriculture and agricultural sales. It was annexed into the city in the mid-1950s. Then it was rezoned to residential, which made it a non-conforming use. And a non-conforming use is a use that was legally established, but that no longer conforms to the zoning regulations. And once a non-conforming use is abandoned, you either have to develop the property with a use that is allowed in that district or rezone to an appropriate zoning district. So the agricultural sales that was a part of this nursery it's allowed only in some of the larger commercial districts, C3, CR, and CS, which would not be feasible in this location. And they're allowed in the IL and the IG, or the general industrial districts. And so that would be the reason we selected the IL district. It would have been necessary if they had come forward and said we want to remove the non-conforming status of our nursery before it was abandoned. We would have had to have recommended the IL district at that time. And this was also done maybe a year ago. At the 12th and Haskell, we had a recycling facility. It had formerly been an auto repair service, turned into a recycling facility, and it was going to be reused as a struct construction yard. And the IL district with limitations was seen as an appropriate district for that, and it's worked very well to maintain the compatibility with the nearby residences. There'd be very minimal physical changes, but I understand you're more concerned with the actual zoning. These are the uses that are associated with the project. The whole project would involve crop agriculture with a lot of greenhouse use, hoop houses, demo gardens, personal improvement. There'd be educational classes teaching people about raising and using local foods, minor amount of general retail sales with accessory and ancillary uses for the crop agriculture. And then the limited manufacturing and production, which would be tofu facility. And they're also looking at perhaps a boutique kitchen, which would use local foods and make prepackaged dinners out of those. That use may not come to be, it may be another use that would be in that building. And those would both be in plan for 2,400 square foot buildings. And then the light wholesale storage and distribution that's being planned is a mail order seed company. And they receive deliveries once a year by semi-truck. And then they distribute those through the mail throughout the year. So it's a very low intensity use. And then there we looked at the possible future uses to be sure that the zoning included all of those. They may be interested in administrative and professional office, maybe a social service agency, fast order food, which would be coffee or bakery, and possibly a health care office or a holistic health care. And so looking at all the uses that would be involved in the project, some of these would be allowed outright in the RS7 or the RSO, that's single dwelling residential office. That's a district that's very compatible with single dwelling residential uses, or the CN1, that's inner neighborhood commercial. That's also very compatible with residential uses. So the uses in the project that would be allowed in these uses are the ones that are recommended for approval just outright with the standards. Most of them have standards limiting the size. The two that require the IL zoning, staff is recommending that those be allowed only when approved through a special use permit process, which is a process very similar to this rezoning. It'll go to the Planning Commission, there'll be a public hearing, and then it comes back to the City Commission for approval. And that way we can ensure that those uses maintain the character that they're looking for with this property, which is the local food, urban ag kind of uses, and also make sure they stay compatible with the residential area. And then the Planning Commission, as I noted, they just recommended approval. So I didn't want to give you a presentation, but I guess I did.
And Commissioner Larson, I would maybe interject as well that, so as we conditioned this zoning, there were several protections we built into the conditions. One Mary mentioned is the special use permit. So if this rezoning gets adopted, they don't get the right to do the tofu facility. They have to go back through the special use permit process, make an application, go to the Planning Commission, come to this body for approval. The other thing we did is condition it that all site plans submitted for all the other uses come to the City Commission on standard and major development projects, not the minor stuff. So instilling those protections within the zoning itself.
So with this zoning here, the tofu factory and the other aspects of it has to still go through the special use? It's not a given that this is part of it?
It's an allowed use with the special use permit approval, so it gives them the opportunity to go through that process, but the special use permit is a discretionary item in front of the City Commission, so we don't have an accompanying special use permit with this application. Is that right?
That's right.
So there's another step after this zoning is approved that opens the door for the applicant to pursue a special use permit for the tofu processing facility.
Now, that's something I didn't understand after all reading all this. Huh.
And so that's where we get to look at the scope and the scale of it and mitigate impacts such as truck traffic and noise and smell and that sort of thing.
So what we're voting on is to change the zoning to IL, but it would not include anything to do with a factory.
Mary, if you open up the ordinance, we'll point out the conditions of the zoning. What we're employing in this particular application is what we call conditional zoning. Zoning occurs in a couple of different ways. One is sort of open-ended, where all the uses in our development code are permitted. They're either permitted by right or permitted via the special use permit process. In a situation where the context of the property demands some special conditions, usually striking out certain uses that aren't compatible with the neighborhood, we employ what we call conditional zoning. So on the screen here, this is within the ordinance itself, permitted uses are limited to only these listed. There are a number of uses allowed in the IL zoning district that are not in this list that that frankly we deem to not be compatible with the residential character of the neighborhood. What Mary was trying to convey was that a lot of these uses are allowed in RSO zoning and CN1, which are deemed typically compatible with residential uses. And so things like social service agency, the crop agriculture, what we tried to do is match up the request, the sort of the menu of uses that the applicant said, hey, these are the things we're looking at as possibilities for this site, to try to get them in this list where appropriate, and then prohibit the other uses in IL that aren't appropriate in this district. And so it's just a zoning tool we have at our disposal. The condition B on screen requires the site plans come to this body. So there are future decisions that need to be made on this property. But the first decision is whether the zoning will accommodate any of the uses requested.
Okay.
Other questions?
Not right now.
Do you have any questions? Okay. Is there any public comment on this item? Good evening.
Good evening, Sonia. I'm Jane Gibson. I live in the Barker neighborhood and have for the last 20-some years. I live outside the 200 feet, but I would argue that putting a factory in a neighborhood changes the character of that neighborhood, and that many of us will then be affected because the quality of life in our neighborhood will be altered by the presence of a factory. Excuse me. And I want to underscore that that really is what this proposal is about. You have before you a list of prospective tenants. Do we really rezone property on the basis of prospective tenants to whom the owner or the property owner has absolutely no legal obligation, either now or in the future? There is no reason why we should change a property to light industrial when we can change it to residential, since it is in a residential neighborhood. That protects the neighborhood from any unknown future uses or any uses in the present. Factories simply don't belong in neighborhoods, and that really is what this is about. This project has received support because there's been a pretty important and significant public relations campaign by the Sunrise Project, and that is an interesting project. But there is nothing to say that the owner has an obligation to put them in there or to keep them there, or that they have an obligation to stay. That is window dressing for what is fundamentally a proposal to put a factory in a neighborhood. Why we are having this conversation is beyond me, really. It seems to me that the zoning code exists for the purpose of segregating incompatible uses, that what we have here is two fundamentally incompatible uses. We have an industrial use and we have a residential neighborhood. And we have a planning commission who has, with all due respect, worked very hard to get to yes, without really considering that the core of the project is actually counter to what the zoning code is for. So if we can just tailor-make zoning in any neighborhood property, because a developer wants to put a factory in that property, what's the zoning code doing? Is it actually something that is applied fairly and equitably? Is it something that we can predict, that we can rely on? I don't think so. I think that we have a real issue here with the process, with how conditional zoning is being used, and with the fact that fundamentally we're trying to put a factory in a neighborhood, and there's all this noise around that bottom line that really will affect the quality of life in our neighborhood. I'd like to urge you to vote no on this project. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment?
Dennis Brown, speaking for myself. I've done some painting work at the current side of the tofu place. I sure wouldn't call it a factory. It's a kitchen with some areas for stock. It's a very low intensity use where it is right now, and I think it would continue to be that way. The place where it's going is not a residential facility. It's been a commercial facility. I would guess that the tofu part of the project, I don't understand the whole Sunrise project, would have less noise and impact on the neighborhood than the greenhouse did. So I would not use the word factory to describe this use. Thanks.
Thank you.
Other public comment? Any other public comment?
Good evening, Mr. Mayor, Vice Mayor, Commissioners. My name's Jim Carpenter. I'm also live in the Barker neighborhood. I've been following this project since there were first rumors of it. I just want to point out a couple of things in the staff report that seem logically inconsistent with the recommendations. We're talking about the golden factors that are from court case Golden versus Overland Park from the late 70s, which is used consistently now in evaluating rezoning projects. One of those is how long it's remained unused in its current zoning. This is RS7 now because of the abandonment of the non-conforming use. It was marketed as a nursery. It was marketed at $750,000, which is an absurd price for residential zoned property. Another is, well, compatibility with the existing neighborhood. But this is surrounded by RS7, and this distinguishes it from the 12th and Haskell project that was brought up earlier. 12th and Haskell to the north and west are both city property, which are essentially being used in light industrial fashions now for storage and gas and such things. To the west is some vacant property, railroad tracks, and it only has residential properties to the south. Now that property was a non-conforming use gone bad. That went from what it was supposed to be and turned into a salvage yard. And neighbors complained for 7 years about it, and it took KDHE involvement until anything actually happened. And that is the risk of non-conforming uses. In fact, that happened with the Sunrise, well, with the nursery Pence's, and before that, the original nursery is expanded to the borders to the south. It expanded beyond what its original non-conforming use was. Also argue that I'm not feeling so well, so I'm sorry. One thing that's not taken into account here is the East Lawrence neighborhood. It's directly across the street. We've got properties within a 200 square feet. It notes in the report that Barker does not have a neighborhood plan, which is correct. But there's no reference to the East Lawrence neighborhood plan and what East Lawrence might feel about this. I mean, they are impacted by this. Just another impact that is creeping towards East Lawrence neighborhood right now is KDHE's been out there and they have found groundwater contamination and some soil contamination, which is probably going to require some monitoring wells. There was chemical storage, diesel fuel storage, which is creeping east-northeast towards the intersection. So, you know, this does have an impact beyond that. And it is, like I said, this is, what's asked tonight is to zone what is currently RS7 as an island of light industrial in a neighborhood. That greenhouse was there before the neighborhood, but when we first had the zoning, it was found to be a non-conforming use, not compatible with residential property, subject to elimination if it was ever abandoned. And this is consistent with the telecommunications tower, the Verizon tower that was asked for along Boline Avenue, along the Burroughs Creek Trail. The city actually was willing to go to court against Verizon over denial of that, because under the plan that was put in place partly with the control of Brook Creek, East Lawrence, Barker neighborhood, that light industrial along that street the hope is it would be phased out and become residential. And the city was willing to follow that plan. The current plan says this is residential property. If there's some other way to get to allowing the applicant to do what they want, we should explore that thoroughly. Which brings me to the use of conditional zoning. Conditional zoning is it's slippery slope. I found today a Journal World article from 2009 to discuss it for the first time when the county wanted to use it. Then Planning Director Linda Finger objected to it. Legal Women Voters objected to it because it could show favoritism. What we have now is with conditional zoning, without a specified method for getting to that point, we just have vagaries in our code that says we can put conditions on things, but we have no application that can be applied equally to every applicant. And the problem back then, and still exists, is what we brought up was the problem showing favoritism. What we have here is you pick and choose pieces of different categories and essentially create a unique and individual zoning category for an applicant. I don't know that we'd be doing the same if it was a different applicant, and it wasn't an applicant that wanted to make the use as they are. But you know, the law is not supposed to pay attention to who's in front of it. It's supposed to apply the law fairly and equally to anybody that comes before the decision-making body. And I don't think that's happening with conditional zoning anymore, and I think that we need to look at that and perhaps put in some better safeguards or a different process if we're going to look at that. Mary Miller has been very helpful in explaining these things to representatives from the neighborhood, and she stated that in the worst case scenario, the greenhouse could be torn down, and what we could do is end up with 3 acres of 3,000 square foot buildings stretched across that, all subject, of course, to special use permit. But once you got one, what's to stop the next one from coming in? Because that's consistently used as, you know, an argument in favor of zoning is what's around it. And like I said, that is the very reason not to agree to this zoning request tonight. If the commission is not willing to vote no to the change in the zoning, then I would ask that you defer this matter and thoroughly examine and establish some coherent policy of conditional zoning that we can go through, and also examine some other options. This has been non-conforming use, as stated before. There's nothing in the Sunrise project or everyone else that requires light industrial except for the new limited manufacturing, and that's beyond what was there before. So you're asking, what's actually asked for tonight is going beyond the use that was there for all these years as a non-conforming use. So this is not simply just saving a building, which I also noticed as you looked at your materials tonight that the Historic Resources Commission or director has said that this would not be a suitable building because it lacks historical integrity. So all the notes in the staff report talking about reuse and saving a historic property, I think are nullified by the fact that Historic Resources Director says it doesn't have the integrity to meet those criteria. So with that, again, I'm asking you to vote no on the rezoning request, or if you're not going to vote no, at least defer this until we have a further discussion about conditional zoning.
Okay, thank you. Any other public comment?
Good evening, Commissioners. I'm Emily Hampton. I'm the Executive Director of Sunrise Project, the nonprofit that's a part of this site. And I just wanted to quickly just express how much support, although I do completely understand, and we have been very understanding of the concerns about this zoning. I believe that all the issues have really been addressed on a number of occasions by Mary Miller, and we just wanted to, let you know that we've gotten nothing but an outpouring of support from most of the neighbors, and especially those neighbors that abut the property. So there's a lot of excitement around it and lots of support. And given from what I understand that not only the tofu facility needs the limited industrial zoning, but also the greenhouses, there's a lot of interest in keeping those greenhouses there, keeping it in the same sort of usage that it's been used for in the past. And so I would ask you to support it so we can not only do the tofu facility and our nonprofit, but also continue the use of the greenhouses, the seed company that wants to be there, and all of the positive community efforts that would like to be on the site. So thank you for your time.
Thank you. Any other public comment?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name is Katie Walsh. I'm speaking only for myself. East Lawrence has been allowed to use conditional zoning in a lot of projects in the last few years, and it has worked very well for us. Our concern is always, like some of the Barker neighbors, how do you check on people? How do you make sure they're adhering, to what has happened? So there needs to be some sort of check system. The term factory obviously is problematic. The tofu facility is very small. Like Mr. Brown said, it is a kitchen. I understand the neighbors' concerns, but I see this as a huge benefit to the community. And I worked for the Milsteins for 10 years, and I know zoning's not supposed to have to do with people, but they are such upstanding, respectable members of our community and have done so much historic preservation and provide so many jobs. Those are the people that the community would be working with. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comment? Any other public comment? Okay, back to the commission. I do have a question about the allowed uses, and one that jumps off the number 12, the telecommunication tower, when approved by a special use permit. Is that something that is part of the original uses? And how would that be specific to this site, or a use allowed to this site? Because one of the things that we got into with the former site, if that thing were to fall, there's no way to put it on a place, unless it's 10 feet tall, that it's not going to hit another building outside of these property lines. So,
Yeah, there are a few uses in that list that aren't associated with this project: religious institutions and the telecommunication tower. And those are, they're covered under different kinds of state laws and regulations. And so it may be possible to completely exclude them. We'd have to work with our city attorney. But he said if we required as far as a religious institution, that can't be excluded. Our LUPA would just require that. The telecommunication tower, there's certain requirements that you can't exclude those from zoning districts. He said we may be able to work out a way to exclude it. However, with the SUP, it's not actually permitted at this time. They'd have to come forward with an SUP, and you'd have the option to approve or deny it at that time. So it's only being added because we didn't go through the steps to find out if legally we could exclude it.
and the only thing that I'm thinking is every time that we have an application on a tower, and, we talk about denial, we somehow end up in a court battle. So it seems to me that, that would be something that you just don't want to get into here. But
Mayor, we feel there's some federal acts working on those two particular uses. And I might also add that the use of limited manufacturing and production is a code-defined use, and it's an establishment employing fewer than 20 people. And uses are typically bakeries, bottling and beverage manufacturing operations, small-scale operations. So factory has a lot of connotations. This is a very small, limited use within the code, just for your information.
Well, it seems to me that one of the questions you have to ask here, that are the uses appropriate for, what's being requested here for the change in zoning to happen. And if it is, and that development is to occur, is our special, our conditions for special use permit to happen and site planning to happen, are they strong enough to take care of the concerns that Jane and Jim brought up earlier? That's the thing that I think that we have to
That's what
ask.
I worry about. I mean, this sailed through planning 8-0, I think it is.
Commissioner, when it was deferred for a while, it had 2 pretty healthy hearings on it, and at the end of the day, their conclusion was a unanimous vote, but it wasn't an easy one. I think there was a lot of discussion. In fact, we had before us, the urban ag text amendment that kind of played in the discussion to see if that could help, and the conclusion was it really couldn't help. With some of the uses, but not all the uses. So I think it was a healthy discussion.
I was at that first planning commission when it came up, and I didn't hear a lot of discussion from the planners themselves at all. There was one gentleman on the end that discussed it, but I just didn't see a lot of discussion from the planners to Mary or the applicants themselves. And so that was concerning. Another concern me about the process was that the neighborhood got the notification, the actual full staff report 4 days before the planning commission meeting, which seems extremely short for a neighborhood to gather and actually try to understand what this entire report's all about. And I was there at the meeting, and the reason it got deferred was because the applicant allowed it to get deferred. And I don't know if that would have been the case if he would not have allowed it, because the only question I saw from the planning commission was that, well, did staff follow the rules of notification? And staff said, yes, we did, and that was good enough for them. That just seems awfully short-sighted for the neighborhood, to me.
Yeah, and I think the planning commission is used to seeing these sort of protections built in the framework that we were trying to provide, because it really is a multi-step process here. And the applicant's taking all the risk on the time and the money and the cost to get there. And this doesn't give any entitlement to the limited manufacturing and production use.
But the neighborhood takes a risk,
The neighborhood takes risk as
a
well.
huge risk. I mean, there's risk on both sides. And I just didn't feel like the neighborhood really got a good chance to decipher this. I think this was, about a 20-page document or so, 4 days to do that. They did get the extension, which was good. They did. It just seems to me that the use of it, I think the Sunrise Green part of it, I think what they do is wonderful. I've gone to their fundraisers before. However, this intensifies the use of that property from what it was, and that really concerns me.
Yeah, it kind of comes.
The potential.
Kind of comes back to, I think Jim said it really well. Your comments that ultimately when you're looking at a rezoning issue, there shouldn't truly be a face to the rezoning. That ultimately, while the Sunrise project might be wonderful, 8 years from now, is that going to be there?
Or is it going to be here next year?
Right.
We don't know.
Do we create a scenario where we go out of our way to bring one product in, and in the process create an environment for a lot of negative product to
Down the
creep
road.
in a bad situation? And that's a tough deal, because it's a good program.
I know.
And KT, your points are well founded too, that this is a good group. That the people we're working with, this isn't like somebody who dropped in from another world and is infiltrating Lawrence, so to speak. These are good people, but ultimately, I think Jim's point is very valid, that you can't, in a rezoning, you can't have a face on that. It's got to be, what do we want the property to be in a seemingly permanent fashion?
Yeah, as far as the tofu, I went and visited the tofu manufacturing plant off of Haskell. Mr. Milstein gave us a tour several months ago, and it was a nice small little facility, and I didn't see anything extremely overtly adverse to it, but it is, I'm sorry, I think it's a little factory. It just is.
So, okay. The question before us tonight is whether or not to approve a change in zoning from RS to IL. But here again, we know what those uses could be. We know the one that's being asked for, and here again, it's appropriate in this district. the one thing that we have to ask ourselves, is our code designed to be able to restrict, to put restrictions of conditions on an SUP or a site plan that is going to take care of the concerns that you may have? I believe, quite honestly, our code does that.
Okay.
And we may have difference of opinion, but our code is, it's pretty thick. So that's all I say. I think it's hard to beat.
But here we get to that, you said we don't know it'll be there tomorrow, and I said 8 years from now. The reason I put that period of time on it is I think all of the 5 of us have a pretty good intention for what we want that property to be. But very realistically, when you change the zoning, when it gets to a point of that property turning over, the 5 of us may not be here. And so we have to make policy not for Sunrise, but make policy for what we want that ground to be. Does that make sense?
Oh, it all makes sense. It really does.
I have a question.
Sure, please.
So do we have to change all of the 2.96 acres to IL zoning to accomplish what the applicants are interested in doing? Or could we do a subsection of that 2.96 to IL and leave the rest where it is? And they would have a limited ability to develop that property.
For a few different reasons, we would recommend zoning the whole property. We think split zoning on the property presents some problems as they seek financing, for example. It also creates some conforming, non-conforming issues on the property for the stuff that's left as a remainder. We believe it really needs to be zoned to something other than either developed to the RS7 standards or developed to a use permitted in RS7 or zoned to something that allows the uses. And we, by the way, we completely agree. We zone property. We don't zone people. That's one of our sayings.
Yeah.
Is so what the real question is this list in the ordinance of uses, if you're comfortable that that list of uses, regardless of who operates those uses or owns the uses, is compatible in the neighborhood or is compatible upon the process of a special use permit, and you find in favor of that compatibility, then there should be support for the project. If you find that those uses aren't compatible, then the zoning is not supportable.
And I know we've been working on the urban agriculture overlay or zoning.
Right, as a
Is that
use.
And I know that's discussed here a little bit in the report, but do you see that as being feasible anytime down the road? Because I think this would be a perfect project for that type of a...
Well, that's what Commissioner Larson, I think, I don't know that you stayed at that meeting, at that planning commission meeting, but we took that text amendment up shortly after this project. Part of the deferral that the commissioner shared later was that he wanted to see if the urban ag text amendment would help this project. And as we discussed that text amendment, we found that it's not going to do the kind of things that support some of the uses, including the manufacturing use on this property. So they would still need to rezone to this package of conditions.
Would it support the Sunrise Green and what they're trying to do with the nonprofit?
It would support many elements of that. Yep. Wouldn't necessarily support there's a seed storage facility that wants to go there. I'm not sure it supports that. It doesn't support the tofu production facility.
Is this area one plat? Is one?
I think it's one development parcel, yes.
So if we wanted to separate it into separate plats for zoning, we could initiate that, and that way the applicant wouldn't have to pay for the charges to do that, right?
Well, they would have to plat the property into different lots, and there's a cost associated with that survey work and doing that. That's typically borne of the applicant.
And the goal there would be to allow some of the use to happen?
As Stuart was saying, or Commissioner Bowley, sorry, Stuart, if there's a way possibly to make, into separate parcels and that way zone appropriately instead of the entire plat. I'm getting a lot of feedback off of this. I don't know if we're turned up too loud or what, but it's an interesting idea to explore.
Okay. Guys, I tell you, I believe that, there are things, I suppose, that are listed as uses that I would have a question about, the telecommunication towers and things that you just don't need in there, that I just don't think are flat appropriate to allow this to happen. But here again, I think that you got to put some faith in the city code that deals with, the land use and how these development codes go together and the restrictions that we can place on SUPs and site plans, so.
Would the SUP be an annual review?
No, the way that typically it's done is it comes with its own list of mitigating conditions, and let's say it's to install certain exhaust filters for odor or something, and those conditions get implemented at the right time, whether it's through the permit process or something. At any time, if a condition isn't being met by the applicant, we can bring it back to the city commission for a hearing. So we typically don't put time limits or annual reviews on it because they're open at any time to review by city.
But Scott, if with the vice mayor's question, could a condition of an annual review by staff?
It could be.
And recommendation happen?
It could. It could be a condition that we would inspect the facility annually.
So I think that there's just things that you can do that you can add on to if you have concerns that, something's going awry. So.
I think that's another idea to explore is perhaps an annual review. It doesn't need to be annual forever, but perhaps just the first few years to make sure that the neighbors are still happy, they still seem compatible with the residential next door.
You have another question, Matt? You sure? Don't leave them on the table.
Well, I'm not sure I'm really excited about an annual review process. I think at that point, we'd go out of our way creating a whole lot of bureaucracy to try to squeeze in one little thing into an area where perhaps it doesn't fit. That ultimately, for a very, very long time, we had a greenhouse there, apparently about 100 years. But ultimately, for the last, 60 years of that wasn't even meeting the zoning. It was allowed, it was grandfathered in, it was allowed to stay, but for essentially the last 60 years, we've said what is there isn't what we want to be there. Suddenly, we're in a point where that property is abandoned. We actually have some ability to act upon this statement we've made for the last 60 years that what is there doesn't fit with the neighborhood and doesn't fit with what we want there. We have the opportunity now to actually act on that, and it seems we've gone quite the opposite direction. And instead of acting upon that, we've said, how can we zone it to make it bigger and less fitting, it sure does feel like we're swimming backwards here.
Okay. Any other feelings along that line?
Well, I can't remember. Were you mayor when they rezoned that?
No.
I don't know what they were thinking when they said RS7 in that.
No.
Mayor, am I
It was
reminding
grandfathered in.
Yeah.
I might remind the commission of the process at this point. You've got a recommendation for approval from the planning commission. So by code, to go contrary to the planning commission, if you don't support the zone, you need 4 out of 5 votes. You can send it back to the commission with specific instructions on looking at certain elements of the project, of the request, by a 3-2 vote. And then when it comes back to you from the planning commission, you can do as you wish, either way, with a simple majority 3-2 vote. So just wanted to remind you of that process in our code. So you can't deny it with a 3-2 vote tonight. You can deny it with a 4-5 vote. You can support it with a 3-2 vote, or send it back to the planning commission with a 3-2 vote.
Okay. Time to count noses then. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we have, Scott just said, okay, I'm on that, I can support the IL district. That discussion, here again, I guess the one thing that I would ask is that we take into consideration the removal of that tower. Here again, I just don't think it belongs there. We do need to get recommendation from legal staff on whether or not we can actually do that. You know, that's fine. I mean, that could be on hold while the ordinance is going through its process of second reading. But, okay, that being said, what do you feel? Do you want it, it's up for approval, we can't deny it, we can send back?
I think
Are
the very-
there other things that you want the planning commission to look at if you're thinking about sending it back?
At the very least, I'd want it to be sent back, but at the very least,
And one of the things that we need to know, Commissioner, is what would you ask the planning commission to be looking at?
whether or not there can be restrictions or removed from that anything to do with the manufacturing, which didn't seem like there can be. The manufacturing.
That's the thing, that I mean, I understand there are three options in theory, but in reality, there's, the way I see it, maybe I'm making it too small, but I think there's really two options, right? We either let it happen or we don't.
Yeah, it's approval or
And if we
denial.
don't have 4 votes to not let it happen, so is there a way we can informally count noses here? And
Well, yeah, we can make a motion.
let's make a motion.
Okay.
Let's do it.
Move to approve.
Okay.
Second.
We have a motion made and second to approve the zoning from IL, or from RS to 7 to IL, and essentially approve ordinance number 9181 on first reading, and concur with the planning commission's recommendation. Is that right? Okay, we have that motion made and seconded. It was made by Commissioner Boley, second by Vice Mayor Soden. Any other questions or comments?
That includes your telecommunication tower provision.
You're going to pull that out, or ask to have it,
If we can do that, yeah.
ask to have that looked at. Is that okay with your second? Okay? Okay? Okay, motion made and second with staff looking at that telecommunication tower. All in favor of that motion, aye.
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 Opposed?
Nay.
No.
Okay, it passes 3-2 on first reading. And that'll be back in a couple of weeks?
Probably next week. We'll look at it and get
You'll be
it
able,
on.
well, only once you have the
Correct.
information from legal staff on the tower, okay?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you all. Next item is on the consent agenda, is to receive a request from Menard Incorporated for economic development assistance to aid in establishing a manufacturing site of 90-plus acres in Lawrence Venture Park, and refer the request to staff for analysis and the Public Incentive Review Committee for recommendation, and establish January 5th, 2016 as a public hearing date on the request. Vice Mayor, you had a question?
Yeah, I'm really excited about this, obviously. I think it's going to be great. There's been some concerns raised about environmental regulations, and so I thought it might be good just to let people know that we do have things in our performance agreement that would address something like that. So if you could speak to that, that would be great.
Yes, Vice Mayor. What we typically would do with these kind of projects is we do have a development agreement that's also a performance agreement with companies that receive incentives. So that would be something that you all would be considering at a future date as this project would proceed and come back to you. And as a standard provision in those agreements, one of the things that we typically would include is the fact that the project will need to be operated in a manner that would be congruent with all applicable rules and regulations and laws. And that's pretty much a standard provision. Again, that would be something that we would be discussing with the company, that we have that in our agreements as a standard practice.
Okay.
Thank you.
Well, I tell you, just like the Vice Mayor said, you talk about an exciting time. I mean, this is, it really is, be able to set the standard pretty high in our new venture park with the Menard company coming to town. I think that that's just incredible, and being able to sell property and be able to use that in a way that, it was used like that forever. It was used like it forever. So being able to reestablish that as an employment center, is something that we can all be proud of as a community, making sure that this happens in a big way. So anyway, a special thank you to the Menard family for considering Lawrence, Kansas. I mean, this is a pretty special deal. So anyway, okay. Other questions? Public comment on this item? Okay. Then the item before us, back to the commission then, is to receive the request from Menard Incorporated and to refer this item to staff for analysis into the Public and City Review Committee for recommendation and establish the January 5th, 2016 as a public hearing date on the request. I entertain that motion to receive the request.
Second.
Motion made and second to receive the request made by Commissioner Foley, second by Vice Mayor Soden, and thanks for bringing that up about the environmental concerns. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? That passes 5-0. Thank you all. City Manager's report. Diane.
Mayor, related to the item that we just discussed, I did just want to note, for those who may be interested, the Public Incentive Review Committee, we would look at scheduling that at 2 p.m. next Tuesday, December the 8th, in this room. So if people are interested in attending that, and staff would also echo our comments about excitement about the project and seeing it go forward through the next steps. Regarding the city manager's report, several things that I wanted to mention to you. First, we have a report about the Emerald Ash Borer, and our Park and Recreation Department has put together a nice summary for you about what those potential impacts are to the city. And of course, the dollar amount is very large, and that is just the dollars related to trees that are on the right-of-ways and then on our publicly owned properties. Obviously, this will have a big effect on the community as a whole and a number of private property owners as well, as it appears that, you know, over the years anyway, we'll be losing all of these ash trees, unfortunately. So this will be a pretty large impact. So that'll be something as we move forward with this, and we also look at future budgets that we'll be discussing in a little bit more detail. I also wanted to mention that we have been visiting with representatives of the universities here in the community related to establishing a student internship program that would be a paid internship with the city. This is something that we began talking about back in the summer, and we would really see this as an opportunity for a student who's either a Haskell student or a KU student to help provide communication amongst the universities. There would obviously be communications between the universities, but also with the city back and forth, and getting input from students on issues, and also having them help us with various projects that we think would be of mutual benefit. So we had been approached by student leadership at KU about how could they be more involved in the city, and we kind of came up with this as an approach. So I'm really excited about it. I did want to mention, I believe that we have Jesse Pringle, who's the student body president at KU, here this evening, and also Stefan Alcorn, who's here, and he's the government relations director. And I think they might want to say just a few words. I don't know that we have any representatives of the Haskell University student body here who were able to come this evening, but if I've missed somebody, let me know. Stefan or Jesse?
Hi everyone, Stefan Alcorn, Government Relations Director for KU Student Senate. I'm a junior. Like Diane was saying, we're really excited to have a formalized relationship between the City of Lawrence, KU Student Senate, and Haskell University Student Senate as well. We think this will not only be great for students to gain, professional experience into what a career in public administration and public service looks like, but, to have students in the room and to just, I guess, have someone who is a student at your disposal to offer input on projects that the city's working on to make sure that student voice is there. So thank you all.
Thank you both for being here.
Yeah, and I've just had, to both of you, I want you all to know how much fun it was being able to work with you, starting back in the summertime. It seems like it's a long time ago, but just the opportunity to have you share ideas about this, and so we look forward to having Representative University of Kansas and also to Haskell Indian Nations University. I think it's going to be a great program, so anyway.
Thank you.
So we're hoping to get that internship started here at the beginning of next year. Also, there's a report for you about America Recycles Day celebration in Lawrence, which was on the 13th of November, and all of the great events that surrounded that recognition. We also have some photos for you of a couple of playgrounds that we recently resurfaced. So I think, as you can see from those pictures, it's quite a dramatic transformation to those playgrounds that we had. Also, Planning and Development Services, they have a memo here for you that's kind of their monthly update on a variety of projects and issues of interest and things that they're working on and what the status of those things are for you. Also, we have several important dates listed for the Solid Waste Division, and these items are service changes and activities for this month and then also in January related to the holidays. And we also did want to make sure to try and plug the idea that we've had for several years where our solid waste crews are doing a toy drive that benefit the Blue Santa program. And I think this is really great. So that's going to be on Monday, December 7th and the 14th. And residents can put out a toy by their trash cans that will be picked up by our crews and redistributed in the community. So I'm really proud of them for coming up with that. And it's a great compliment to what the police department does as well. So these are, again, just things that we'll be publicizing in the community so people know when to get the trash and recycling out on the right days.
Okay.
And that's all that I have.
Questions or comments? Well, Diane, make sure, and anybody that's here from staff, supervisory people, make sure that you thank everybody that helps with, toy drives and just everything that y'all do. You provide a lot of great service to residents, but on top of that, just a lot of good people stuff. So thank you all.
Yeah, and I should also mention briefly, I know we've sent out some information that our park and recreation facilities are also collecting those toys. So there's really a lot of departments that are involved in that. So I'm really proud of their efforts.
Okay. So any other questions? Okay. Thank you, Diane. Thanks, everybody, for the work. Next item on the agenda is general public comment. The public is allowed to speak on any items or issues that are not scheduled on the agenda after first being recognized by the mayor. As a general practice, the commission will not discuss or debate these items, nor the commission make decisions on items presented during this time. Rather, they will refer the items to staff for follow-up. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone, sign in, and state their name and address, and speakers should address all the questions and comments they have to the commission. So are there any general public comments this evening? Somehow I knew it would take me longer to say all of that than comments that I was going to receive. Sure, there's no general public comment. Okay, thank you all. So we are on to the regular agenda, and again, the public is allowed to speak on any of the regular agenda items or give public comment after first being recognized by the mayor. Individuals are asked to come to the microphone again and sign in and state their names, and speakers, again, please address all questions and comments to the commission. Please do us a favor, if you brought your cell phone tonight, you might want to silence that. You're not going to need it while you're here, so anyway, we'll go on to the first item on the regular agenda. That is to conduct a public hearing to consider the vacation of right-of-way described as Lot 6, 7A, 7B, 8, and 9 on Quarry Lane in the Rock Ledge Addition. And this is also known as 3100 block of Bob Billings Parkway, 2133 Terrace Road, 2131 Terrace Road, 2129 Terrace Road. This is as requested by the property owners, Robert and Elizabeth Lickwart, Susan Broso, and William Kalinich, and Kylie Manahan. Chuck.
Good evening. I'm not going to attempt to reiterate what you just said, but You're here tonight to consider the application of 5, basically, applications. We've kind of lumped them all together for the vacation of certain sections of Quarry Lane. If you remember, a couple weeks ago, the commission approved the replat of this area here. This was Quarry Lane. It was vacated at that time. Quarry Lane isn't expected to go through at any time in the near future. So the adjacent property owners have requested their vacation. We've notified all the properties within a 200-foot radius, all the utility companies. We have had no objections. So your action tonight would be to open a public hearing pending any comments, close the public hearing, and then consider the order of vacation.
Okay, so then the replat that we did in recent past.
Yes.
The access for that comes from the north off of Terrace Road, right?
Yes.
That's its total deal.
Yes.
That's where it comes, okay. Nothing, we didn't landlock any of that?
No, nobody's landlocked. They all have access off of Terrace Road.
Okay, sounds good. Other questions? Okay, thanks, Chuck. I would entertain a motion to open the public hearing. Motion made and second to open the public hearing, made by Commissioner Boley, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? Public hearing is open. Is there any public comment on this item? Any public comment? Yes, ma'am.
Courtney Shipley, 1125 Castlewood. I really have more of a question. Are you able to vacate it entirely all the way to Iowa at this time?
Vacate Terrace Road?
See, it goes around through some other properties there.
Yeah, I think some of the people that own their own properties might have a little bit of a problem with that.
Well, I'm only aware of 2 of them particularly, but yeah.
In order to do that, if somebody's interested, we would need applications from the new property owners and do another process. We haven't notified anybody that was going to be on the agenda.
Okay. Have you been approached by, if you could come back up, have you been approached by somebody that would be interested in that?
Well, I don't represent them officially at this exact moment, but 2 of the property owners, the church and then the house next to it, it kind of bisects those properties. Really, eventually the theory is they'll be replatted together as one property, so we'll just have to come and have this conversation again. So I just thought, since you were already on it, to avoid wasting your time, would it be possible to do that?
You know,
that's all I wondered.
It's never a waste of our time. We'll see you again soon. Okay. Is there any other public comment on this item? Any other public comment? Thank you for your comment. I would entertain a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
Motion made and second to close the public hearing, made by Commissioner Herbert, second by Vice Mayor Soden. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The public hearing is closed. Any other questions or comments about this? I would entertain a motion that we order the vacation. Motion made and second to order the vacation of those properties. Made by Commissioner Boley, second by Commissioner Herbert. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? That passes 5-0. Any other things we need to do on this, Chuck?
Nope.
Just order the vacation, okay? Next item is to receive a recommendation from the Public Incentive Advisory Committee on Industrial Revenue Bond Financing for the redevelopment of the 800 New Hampshire Street and adoption of Resolution Number 7135, authorizing the issuance of up to $7,800,000 in industrial revenue bonds for the 800 New Hampshire project for the purpose of obtaining a sales tax exemption on project construction materials. Brett?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. Rick Krumkino, City Economic Development Coordinator. You have tonight before you consideration of what we call a standalone IRB or Industrial Revenue Bond request for the 800 New Hampshire project. It is to get a sales tax exemption on the construction materials. And before I go further, I'll have the applicant talk a little bit more about the project and everything, but I wanted to briefly recap what an IRB is, just kind of go over that so you have kind of an idea. This is an economic development tool used to purchase, acquire, or construct facilities around certain business types. It places no bond liability or risk on the part of the city. The applicant is responsible for marketing, selling the bonds, as well as paying all expenses related to that. If the company defaults, the bond owners cannot look to the city for payments. So industrial revenue bonds place no liability on the part of the city. Industrial revenue bonds can be used to get a property tax abatement. That is not the case for this property. It is what we call a standalone IRB, where it's used just to get the sales tax exemption on the construction materials for the project. And the overall process is the city would authorize a resolution of intent, which the applicant would then use to go to the state to get a project exemption certificate. Their contractors would then use that when purchasing materials so that they get the sales tax exemption. The applicant arranges for financing and marketing of the bonds. When the project costs are known, placements of the bonds arranged, and the trustee bank selected, then bond counsel will finish up all the bond documents. At that point, it comes back to you for authorization of the bond documents through an ordinance. So that's kind of an overview of, a quick overview of the IRB. I also wanted to just kind of recap this to work here. There we go. I wanted to recap kind of the sales tax, the estimated sales tax savings for this project. The total project costs are estimated at about $7 million. The applicant is estimating about 50% of that will be for materials. Using that and our current tax rates, the total savings to the applicant is approximately $316,600 and some dollars. Given our current tax rates, the amount is primarily shared by it's bore by the state with the 6.5% tax rate. The city total would estimate at about $74,000, and the county total at about $12,500. So I just wanted to kind of recap all of that. And then I'd like to invite the applicant to come up and talk about their project and their request. And then if you have additional questions, I'll be happy to answer those. Thank you.
Thank you, Britt. My name is Bill Fleming. I'm General Counsel for Trainer Architects, and I represent the applicant, which is 800 New Hampshire LLC. So I have a PowerPoint here. I'm just not sure exactly how to fire it up here. It's going to be on that movable disk drive. There you go. That's got to be it. Oh, that's
Oops.
D. Try. No.
We might need some technical assistance up here.
Maybe, does it go to the other one?
Try that.
Sorry, though, those guys.
Did you want this turned down? Is it not?
Are you ready?
No, I'm fine.
I'm not getting it in right.
Turn it back on.
I'm just teasing.
Why don't you guys sweat?
Sweat.
Let's turn it around, maybe.
Right behind the mayor.
Yeah, that would do it.
This looks different. For sure this is a USB drive.
That's what that is.
No. Commissioner Bowley was asking about shag carpet.
No, it's doing it.
Just thinking about.
There we go. Now we're making some progress.
I'll let you get it.
Okay, here we go. Sorry about that. The project's located at 8th and New Hampshire in downtown Lawrence. It's the existing Pachamama's building, and the plan is to add 4 stories of apartments on top of it. So there'll be 55 units. I think there's 23 studios, 16 one-bedrooms, and 16 two-bedrooms that will be part of the project. The location here is just kind of a, you know, this is basically 8th Street here. This is New Hampshire right here. So here's the, I think that's the existing west, I'm not sure, that's the existing West Star building that got torn down for a new project, I think. So this is probably an old aerial here. So here's just some views of the Pachamama's building. The idea is to preserve the Pachamama's building, so we're not tearing down the building, we're just adding on top of it. Here's just kind of, again, just a quick summary of the program of what we're doing. And so here's some of the visuals. We've been through the city approval process, so we've gone to HRC. I think the sole condition remaining is for the ARC, which is a subset of the HRC, to approve our exterior material selections, which that very first picture I showed you, I think, is what's in front of the ARC right now for approval. So again, just real quickly, I'll give you a couple other views of this thing. We're requesting an industrial revenue bond to be issued for the project. I'm just going to quickly summarize IRB how it works, which I'm going to try not to repeat much of what Britt said. So again, the city doesn't have any financial risk on the IRB. You know, they're being issued to finance industrial projects and certain kinds of residential projects. As Britt noted, this IRB is being requested to save the sales tax on the project. Potential savings are around $300,000. As Britt has illustrated, the out-of-pocket costs to the city are summarized on this table that she prepared, and that's the out-of-pocket cost to each of the taxing jurisdictions as well. Again, kind of reiterate, there is no financial exposure for the city. The taxpayers are not on the hook to repay the bonds. City policy on IRBs. We've had a city policy on IRBs since around 1975. From my research, it looks like the existing city's policy was formulated about May of 1989, and I think there were some revisions made to that in maybe 2010. The current policies on the city website, it's stated as part of the Economic Development Goals, Process, and Procedures. So that's where it can be found. There's actually a memo on the city website that kind of details the history of the use of the IRB in the community. And that's where I got this information. I think it was prepared by Rogers Alternitis back in 2010. But anyway, historically, IRBs have been used to finance or to help finance senior residential housing projects in Lawrence. So you can see here, Lawrence, Presbyterian Manor, Prairie Ridge, Vermont Towers, Brandon Woods, Drury Place, Nuvant, all of these are basically senior residential housing projects. And then basically our existing policy also allows, as I understand the IRB can be used anywhere in the city that you want to use it, but our policy basically says we're not going to use it everywhere in the city, except if it's senior residential housing or if it meets certain criteria for a downtown infill development. So that's kind of why we're here. You know, the process that we go through is we file our application with the city, you refer it to the PERC. The PERC, here's our request. They've made a positive recommendation to the city after the review by the PERC, and then obviously it comes to you for further consideration. You know, we would note about the IRB policy, it's a long-standing policy. It's been used on the projects that I've noted. I think there was also some additional materials that was provided to you as part of the agenda that also noticed the use of some of the IRBs more recently. I also believe that the policy meets your current IRB policy based partly evidenced by the positive perk recommendation, and basically, as I understand the policy, it's there designed to support infill development in downtown on residential mixed-use projects, just as a quick summary. So that's why the policy is there. It's to encourage additional density, it's to encourage additional development for the downtown, and that's obviously what we're doing, and that's why we're asking for this. We think that use of this type of development tool is consistent with Horizon 2020. We as a community made a decision a long time ago that we're not going to have cornfield malls, that type of thing. So we fought that battle 30 years ago, and we've tried to put our emphasis into downtown and supporting a strong downtown. And I realize there's sometimes a difference of opinion in our community about whether residential density helps your downtown. I obviously am a strong proponent. I think that the residential density, the more people we can bring downtown that live downtown, that shop downtown, that work downtown, the better it is for our downtown to help strengthen our downtown. Trainer Architects, where I work, we used to be out by the school district building up on McDonald Drive. We developed a project about 3 years ago. We moved downtown. It's been a great, it's been great for our firm to be moved downtown, and I think having, those additional workers and those additional people living here helps make this a better community. So, obviously we've heard these buzzwords, sustainability, those are important issues as well. And I think stewardship is an important issue. I mean, the reason we have this policy, the reason this policy is in place is to encourage, sustainable development and development that supports the appropriate use of resources for our community. So, as we all know, infill has potential to address the the following public problems and concerns. We're all typically concerned about suburban growth. You as a city commissioner are concerned about the amount of infrastructure you have to extend. Much of the infrastructure as a city you have to extend involves building arterial streets, clear out, way in advance of the growth, because you can't wait till the growth happens to build the arterial street. You have to get ahead of that. The new sewer treatment plant it's great that we have that problem. We have to build that. We have a growing community, and that's a great problem to have as well. But a lot of those investments that you make as the city, as a community, we have to make way in advance of that growth occurring. And so obviously anything that we can do that actually redevelops and increases the density of existing sites in the city is something that we should encourage. And that's what I think the policy is in place to do. There's obviously in this particular project really no additional increased tax base. It provides increased tax base, but there's no additional investment that the city has to make in infrastructure. We're actually, as part of our North project, we're actually in the process right now of the reason that New Hampshire's torn up right now is we're putting in a new city water line there, which is actually being paid for out of the cost of our North project. So anyway, so those are things that I think that we should encourage, obviously, as part of our goals and objectives and as part of our economic development policies. So one of the questions we had was, and one of the questions on the application is, does your project meet LEED certification requirements? And what I provided here, and I can certainly provide a hard copy of this, is our preliminary checklist that we do for LEED certification. And so we actually go through a process and we look at all the factors that go into LEED certification. And for those that don't know, LEED certification is basically a green building type of code that encourages reuse of materials, encourages energy conservation, and it's kind of a national type of program that is very popular, I guess would be the best word to describe. We do a lot of LEED certified projects all over the country. And so this is an issue that's, I think, becoming much more prominent for people to try to make sure that their projects are green and sustainable. And as you can see, this project meets those requirements, which again is part of your requirements as well as part of your consideration under your policy. And so just wanted to provide that to you. The other issue, just kind of going towards this whole issue of infill development, is what I've shown you here is just kind of a graphic that shows the size of our site, which we're sitting on a total of 0.4 acres, so less than 1 acre, and we've got 55 residential units on less than 0.4 acres. If you took the same type of development, and this is a little bit of apples and oranges because your residential density is different. We've got 23 studios, 16 one-bedrooms, 16 two-bedrooms. So our density is slightly different. In the East Lawrence neighborhood, you'd have probably more like 2.5 or 3.0 type of density, I would guess. But the same 55 units, if you did that in East Lawrence, would be 9 acres. So just to kind of give you some sense of scale of how much land you would have to take up to do the same type of density. And same thing here, if you go to West Lawrence, this is an existing development out there in West Lawrence. It's 92 units on 27 acres. And so if you compare our density to that, we've got 55 units on 0.4 acres, and they've got 55 units on 13 acres. And so when you look at that issue, obviously, under our development code, typically the local developer puts the infrastructure in for the actual development itself. So if I'm a developer, I'm putting in the city streets, I'm putting in the water line for the development and that sort of thing. But there's still a huge cost to the city for the major arterial streets, for the major projects like the sewer treatment plant. All of those still require a significant amount of investment for the city to carry that out there. And then the other thing that's interesting is if you look at the tax base that's created there, as you can see, your density is about 3.4 units per acre. So let's say that's $1 million of assessed valuation if we think that, we've got $300,000 houses, I guess, just to kind of make up the number. I got $1 million. I'm getting assessed at 11.5% under our code. So that's about $100,000 of assessed value, and I'm collecting about 10% of that. So that 3.4 acres is making about $10,000 a year in real estate taxes for the city. And that's what the city then has to use to pay for all this infrastructure that goes in. Our project, once we build it, we'll be adding about $8 million of additional assessed value, and we're not asking for any tax, TDD, any other incentives. So that's going to go on the tax rolls immediately as soon as it's up and going. And that's going to generate about $120,000 a year. So just to compare the two, there's about, we're taking, less than 1/10 of the size. We're generating about 12 times as much revenue per that same size. So that's why, as the city, we should encourage infill development because it's doing a much better job of providing those kinds of resources to the city and makes sense, obviously. The other things about infill development, though, that you do have to consider is it's much more expensive to build in downtown. We have parking issues, which we're all aware of, especially on this project. Parking costs are expensive. And frankly, we need if we're going to encourage this type of development, we need some of these kinds of development tools to help us make the numbers work. So that's another reason, obviously, why we're here. So impact on the ad valorem tax base. Again, there's no other incentives. It's kind of a repeat of what I just said, but no other incentives other than the IRB. The existing ad valorem fair market value is about $1.8 million. Which is that existing building, and we would increase that by approximately $8 million, which should generate roughly $120,000 of additional tax revenue for the city, the county, and the school district. And as you know, you all share that in various percentages. I think the city shares Diane can help me if I'm wrong, but about maybe 25% of that total goes back to the city, and 30% or so goes to the county, another 35, 40%, or the rest of it, my math's not adding up to 100%, but the rest of it basically is going to the school district. There's a small piece of that that actually goes to the state of Kansas as well. So, benefits to the community. Part of what the current policy basically says is that we should encourage and support developers that are also doing things in our community. And so I think that our development group has done as much, if not more, in the community. And I think that we have a very strong, we have a strong tie to downtown Lawrence. We have a strong tie to the community. And I think we do a lot of things for the community, some of which maybe is recognized and some of which is not. So this is kind of my chance to kind of tell you about what we do a little bit. I was a little bit amused by one of the comments that came in later that you got that was opposed to our project. And part of the comment was not being very happy about the access to the Social Service League building was part of the comment that you guys received. Well, we paid over $100,000 to renovate the Social Service League building as part of our Marriott townhome project. So the reason that hopefully the Social Service League building is there and is continued to stand up is because we spent a lot of money to redo the entire building, put a new roof on it, give it new bathrooms, the whole 9 yards. So the current reason that your New Hampshire street is torn up is because we're paying to put in a new water line down the street. We had an issue here a couple years ago where we have on the West Star building that we tore down to build our new North project. Had an existing mural on it, which was a very valuable to a lot of the people in the community. They wanted to see that preserved, so we created space on our new building to recreate that mural. And then we also gave the Spencer Art Museum about $20,000 so that they could hire artists and other people to go out and recreate that mural on the building. This is a little more esoteric, but maybe people don't realize this. The 901 building that we built was part of an existing TIF district called the Downtown 2000 TIF district. And for whatever reason, it didn't really work very well when they did it. And if you know some of the history here, the public parking garage that's located there now was built. All the development that was supposed to come in around the public parking garage didn't get built, or at least a lot of it didn't get built until we came along. And so the original plan was for the public to pay for about half of that cost of that garage and for the development to pay for the other half. Well, of course, the other half didn't materialize. And so when we came along, we actually worked with, then Dave Corliss was the city manager at the time, but we worked with him on a way to then take our project and allow it to help benefit the city in terms of helping pay back the cost of that original public parking garage. So even though our project's kind of across the street, the new hotel, and we don't really use the public parking garage that much, we actually took money out of that project and we're using that to help pay for, it's a kind of a flat $850,000, but that's coming from our hotel project back to the city to help pay for the city-owned parking garage that had been built there before. 901 New Hampshire, which we did finally build, it generates about $160,000 a year in real estate taxes, which of course the city gets a significant share, which again now, building the parking garage starts to make sense when you have that type of additional revenue stream coming in. Some of the other things that we've done is we gave about 3.3 acres to the community theater, probably worth $800,000 of land value that we gave to them to build their new community theater out at Bower Farm. We're providing, in our North project, we're providing some new bathrooms for the use of the farmer's market down there. Obviously, both Compton and Trenton, both of our offices are headquartered in downtown. When we moved down here, we had about 40 people. We've now grown to about 60 people in downtown. So we've seen some very remarkable growth in the downtown location. We love being downtown, and I think that we're obviously a good example of the benefits of bringing businesses downtown. Doug also was out on the outside of downtown and moved his offices down here. So both of our businesses are located in downtown, and obviously we both have a lot of high-paying, very, very good jobs for our community. I would also say that, and I'm not trying to criticize other projects, but there was another local project that recently ran an ad, and it was basically congratulations to all of our subcontractors and our contractors that worked on this project. And you guys are going to know which project I'm talking about probably. But I found it interesting because I didn't recognize a single name on the list of the contractors and the subcontractors that worked on that project. And that's not the case for us. I mean, all of our subs are either, we do have some subs from Topeka because we need, there's certain things that aren't provided here in Lawrence, but for the most part, most of the people that are working on our projects are local people that are being hired, local subcontractors that are doing the work. So finally, I think as part of our kind of continued effort to be responsible to the community, and I know that affordable housing is a big issue right now in the community, we would like to propose that we would make a $75,000 contribution to the city for the Affordable Housing Trust Fund. And your current policy allows what are called payments in lieu of taxes. So I don't know if this is a payment in lieu of tax, but the idea would be for us to also take some of the benefits from this and use it to support the community, support housing. Also, I think it's something that supports, it's something that benefits the city, the county, and there's been some recent articles about even the school district talking about how important housing is for children and their performance in school. And so I think it's something that would be a great benefit for all the taxing districts. And so that's what we would propose as part of our request for you guys to consider approving our request for the incentives for the development tool. So arguments against, it's probably true that we're going to build this project anyway because we're already pretty well committed to doing it. But it's not a situation under your current policy for IRBs. You don't have to do a but-for analysis, so that's not a requirement under your current rules. And so we don't have to make a showing. Now, when we do other development tools, we do have to make that showing, but this is not one of them. So, closing, obviously, we would really appreciate your support for the use of the IRB for the project. I would, certainly urge the city and the commission to be consistent with your policy. I think that the current commission has the power to change the policy. If you want to change the policy, you have every right to do that. But this is the existing policy, and I think that you should adhere to your existing policy. We go through and we have extensive requirements that we have to meet that include going to HRC, doing downtown development guidelines that we have to meet. We have to go through extensive review of our plans. We have fire code issues. We have lots of regulation and a lot of process that we have to go through in order to develop a project. And we would just obviously appreciate the city, adhering to their policies, which encourage, frankly, this type of project, infill development downtown that's residential mixed use. This is exactly the kind of project that the policy was put in place to support. So anyway, that's the end of my comments, and I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Question, Matthew?
I have two of them actually, and they reference specific slides. So if you want,
okay,
if you want to go to them, that might be helpful. The first question comes from slide number 16. One of the comments you make in that slide, I'll let you get to it so we can
Okay.
make sure I'm at the right one. Yeah, the fifth bullet point there, most of tax benefit flows to the state of Kansas. Retention of dollars in community permits more affordable rents.
Right.
What are the rent prices that you're talking about for those units?
They'll range $1.40, $1.50 a square foot in that range. That's consistent with.
So what is that like on a two-bedroom apartment? What are we talking?
Well, if you had a 1,000 square foot apartment, then it'd be $1,200 a month in that range.
Okay. And then my second question comes from slide 23. On slide 23, I believe that's the slide where you were justifying the necessity, even though you say in the presentation that you don't have a but-for clause because it's not required. But in this slide, you were talking about the necessity for it. And one of the reasons you said it was necessary was that parking costs with infill can be prohibitive, certainly. But this project does not have any parking, is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's more of a general comment about infill development, why it's expensive.
But none of the IRB money would be used in any way for parking?
No.
Okay.
There's no, well, we have like 8 spaces or something like that, of parking that we're providing on this project.
That's all my questions.
Okay. Other questions?
I was going to ask about rents as well, so you already hit my question.
Okay.
I just had a question on the leads. I know you're not going for like full certification on that.
Right.
But you are going to be tracking that, is that correct?
Right, yeah, that's what this is basically shows. This is a kind of a pre-checklist that we do that provides all the lead factors and then kind of provides a scorecard at the bottom for how many points we would generate. And this is the type of project that scores pretty well with LEED because they really encourage adaptive reuse of buildings. So when you have an existing building like that and you're not tearing it down, that's good for LEED. And if you have a project that doesn't involve a greenfield site, where you're going and putting in kind of the urban sprawl type of deal, I guess, that's really good for LEED as well, because those are the types of projects that LEED wants to encourage to support. Okay. Is kind of that adaptive reuse of our existing infrastructure, existing buildings.
So is that something that's filed with the city, or is that just something you maintain in your files? Or is
I'm
that
just
something-
providing it to the city. I'd be happy to provide it to you or provide it to the city as part of our process. I mean, it's part of your development application on this.
Okay.
It basically says, are you getting LEED certified? Are you designing it to LEED standards is what your application provides. And if you would like to, have this information, I could do a final scorecard for you when we're done. And
Yeah, I think
provide
it'd be
that
nice
as
to see it.
Sure.
Because it's something that I think is really important to Lawrence is to encourage this type of design and development, make sure we are doing everything we can to be stewards of the environment.
I would agree with that. And we see that in a lot of communities too. We see a lot of the LEED certification. I think if you go to Chicago, you have to build LEED buildings. And I'm not saying we go that far, but there's a lot of communities that have gone that far because they want to really encourage the LEED process. So.
Any other questions of Bill? Just one real quick, and again, the item that is before us tonight is for the sales tax exemption for the IRBs. The effect on the city of Lawrence total is $74,000 and some change.
Correct.
You're suggesting paying a pilot of $75,000 for the Affordable Housing Trust, correct?
Correct.
Okay. It has nothing to do with the building, all of that has all gone through the process, okay? There's nothing to do with parking per se, other than when we talk about parking at this point, how does the property here not have to go through a parking requirement, similar to the 901 building, and I assume, just because of the zoning?
Because the CD zoning does not require on-site parking per project. The city provides parking on the surface lots. The parking we've seen downtown is out of a design element of the desire of the applicant and the project's requirements, not the city code requirements.
Okay. The only reason that I bring it up, those are the questions that I've gone through today, and folks wondering why, that parking's not required in these particular cases, and, why is it required in some, why is it not required in others? And obviously, the downtown district is, pretty special, so.
Well, the whole issue of downtown parking may be a good discussion for another day. I don't know, we probably want to have that tonight, but I mean, we're obviously part of that community as well, and so we're going to have to work with everybody in that area to come up with parking solutions that work for people. So we're going to be good neighbors, and we're going to make sure that we come up with some solutions, and we have to, because we're trying to rent our apartments to people, so we're going to have some good solutions for that. So
Well, one of my suggestions is going to be, and I'll invite you now, if the commission will agree to go along with this, I think that we really need to have a discussion about parking solutions in the downtown, and at the same time, that I think it is something that this commission needs to talk about, if there is going to be a change in, the public incentive policy, we need to have that discussion right after the first of the year. Yeah. And I believe, separate from this, and I don't want to bring that up right now, but I think it's important, this is one that was in the pipe, and, understand, I think it's a great project, but I think it's something that, if there's, I keep hearing all this stuff about change. Well, the policy's gotten us a long way, and, we've done some pretty good things in our community. It's time to discuss change. Let's talk about it. Let's clear the air. So, anyway.
Great.
Thanks, Bill. Okay, any other questions of Mr. Fleming?
Okay. Thank you very much for your time, and I want to say thanks to Britt, because she's really very helpful to me in doing everything, and Diane and everybody else. So I just want to make sure that we acknowledge them for everything they do too. So.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Britt?
Yep, Mayor and Commissioners, one of the actions tonight is to receive the recommendation from the Public Incentive Advisory Committee for this particular request. The PERC committee did meet on August 4th to consider the request, and a motion was made to recommend authorizing industrial revenue bond financing for the project to access a sales tax exemption on construction materials. The motion passed 5-0, so I wanted to officially.
At PERC, 4-1.
Was it 4-1?
Because I voted against it and I was at PERC.
Oh, I'm sorry. Was it 5-1?
4-1.
4-1, okay, sorry.
Well, Jeremy called in, so I'm trying to think in my head. It might have been 5-1.
No, the minutes said
4. Yeah, there wasn't a...
But it did mention that Jeremy Farmer had phoned in.
He did, that was D-Day.
That might have been inappropriate, sorry.
Oh, okay. Any other questions of anyone at this point?
So I just want to make sure I understand the two things that I was, the leads part of it, and then also the $75,000 for the housing authority. That is all part of this project, is that correct?
It's for the trust fund,
Right,
not
the trust fund,
housing authority.
I'm sorry, the trust fund, yeah.
Right.
So that will definitely go there.
What I might suggest is that you have a resolution of intent in front of you this evening. And then remember, with these bond ordinances, you have the resolution of intent as a first step, and then later, as the project proceeds and the project costs are more solidified, then there'll be a bond ordinance, first and second reading, that you'll consider. But really, this is a key step, because after this action, if it's approved this evening, that's when we apply for the sales tax exemption. So that said, I would suggest that if you would like to add any provisions to the approval this evening, including the $75,000 that was mentioned by Mr. Fleming, and any requirements on lead certification, or perhaps if you just want to require them to submit an architect certification or something about lead certification, that I would suggest just be added to the resolution that's in front of you this evening, which you could just handle by a motion, and we'll make sure that that gets added before the mayor would sign the resolution.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that the format that Mr. Fleming was showing us was adequate, as long as, because if they sign off on that and they do the scoring.
Okay. Okay, any other questions of staff or anybody right now? Okay. Public comment? Is there any public comment on this item? Anybody?
Okay.
Oh, okay.
My name is KH, otherwise known as Catherine Harris, and I live at 916 Rhode Island. And my comments do have to do with parking. Well, I'm going to frame in my own experience. I live in the 900 block of Rhode Island, and Port Fonda just opened, and our parking has already is being affected by that restaurant, and that's just one business. I don't know what the occupancy of it is, but all of 9th Street all the way down to Connecticut is full on both sides, and then we're parking onto our block, and it's affecting our ability to park.
near our house. I'm really concerned about putting that many apartments into that space without adequate parking. I'm happy to hear that, that's an issue for them, and if they build, which it sounds like they will, but if they build, then to rent their apartments, they'll have to come up with parking solutions. But I looked at the report on parking that indicates that northeast quadrant having lots of empty spaces. That has to be just the parking garage, because in the evenings when I'm out, the parking is full. They're in the 800 block of Rhode Island, between New Hampshire and Rhode Island, by Salida Lindo and those restaurants. That's always full in the evenings. It's full all the way down 9th Street now. And I just think that, I'm going to tie this into the sales tax, but that if we don't collect the sales tax, the city is going to incur costs having to do with dealing with parking. I know the neighborhood has talked about going to some kind of permit parking. Well, then that requires somebody to check that, and that expands parking control into the neighborhood. I'm just really concerned about this project pushing that much traffic and parking into the neighborhood. So, thank you, Mayor and Commissioners.
Gage, thank you. Frank? Sorry, I didn't see you behind the pole back there.
I was hiding. Frank Jansen, 813th Street, New Hampshire. First, I want to correct, not really correct, but Mr. Fleming mentioned the $100,000 social service he got. In the community, we understood that to be basically a payoff, so social service would not oppose the 900 block of New Hampshire project. So they would set back, we'll give you this money and repair your building if you don't oppose this project. The parking issue, I believe there's a commissioner on the commission right now, who some time ago mentioned the problem of the current code in the city downtown not requiring parking, and that should perhaps be changed, as you say, in the future. It can't be done now. The other suggestion regarding the parking in the East Lawrence area, I'm sure you know that many other large cities have restricted areas, so people in those residential areas on Rhode Island, for instance, would have stickers that they can park there and nobody else could. That'll be something you can think of in the future. Otherwise, how many people here would not mind parking a block away from where they live? How many of you wouldn't mind parking a block away from where you live? That may be the problem here with Patchomack building with people parking far away. Thanks.
Thank you. Other public comment?
Good evening, Mayor and Commissioners. My name's Katie Walsh, and I represent 7 homeowners and 1 long-term renter in the 700 and 800 block of Rhode Island. I hope you'll cut me a little bit of slack. I'll talk fast. I wanted to remind this, just firstly, I wanted to remind this present City Commission that the last City Commission voted to have a full, deep corridor study about Vermont and New Hampshire streets as we rapidly develop these streets, and they are changing so quickly. Rather than just being reactive to whoever comes forward, to have an idea about how tall we want things, scale and mass, what downtown truly needs in terms of services, what the full community needs. There was a short, kind of superficial report done during the Marriott thing. But they did vote, and you may remember this, Mayor Amix, but then they never directed staff to do it. So I would ask this commission to consider that. I think it's time to look at Vermont and New Hampshire. So that said, so Pachamama's 55 bedrooms, 8 parking places. They'll have 3 permanent employees, so 3 of those spaces will presumably be for them. These 55 plus tenants will have boyfriends and girlfriends if they're lucky, and they'll bring more cars to the area. So there's parking issues. Directly across New Hampshire from the project is Callahan Creek, Cindy Maud's big advertising public relations firm. They have 63 to 68 employees. She moved that business to Lawrence from Topeka. Not all, but most commute from out of town, so they rely on parking there. I'm sure you've heard from her. There's been questions, what will happen to the farmers market? They have a year-to-year agreement. I realize they're building restrooms. Farmers market needs some parking stalls. The Riverfront Mall in the city lot north of 7th on Rhode Island Street is often empty, but even when the public library was using the Borders building and our wonderful Brad Allen, the director, tried to get all his employees to park north of 7th Street, still they spilled out all over the neighborhood. Let's see. Right now, the people who are in the old Charlton Manley building, where Mike Devers' office is at 8th and Rhode Island, they tow constantly anyone who parks in their lot. Mr. Trainer and Mr. Compton own the Borders building, and they're using some of it for staging, but they also are towing anyone who parks in the places they own near the Borders building. So there's already parking pressure. It's also assumed that whatever goes into the Borders building will need all those adjacent spaces. The plan is recommending that the future tenants use the underused lots north of 7th, but as Frank said, people will be schlepping their groceries and their kids. It might be older people living there. It seems unlikely. And also the Turn Hall, whoever owns it, is required to have a community use on the main floor, which is part of the ownership agreement, and they too will need parking. They talked about the 3 permanent employees will make an average of $35,000 a year. And then later in the application it says, but only 33.33% of the employees will receive this wage. So that's just a contradiction in the application that I don't understand. Back to parking, if they are allowed to put this added parking pressure on downtown businesses, workers, and customers, and on the adjoining neighborhood, I think they should be required to provide real and needed benefits to the community. The $75,000 contribution is lovely, but I think that what we really need, these are all market rate apartments. $1,200 a month is the monthly salary of a lot of the people who live in East Lawrence. That's not market rate for blue-collar people. Tenants to homeowners, and I've talked to them recently, continue to say they would be thrilled to have a presence downtown. They would love to build out some of these apartments. They would pay for the build out. It's federal funds coming to our community. We need permanent, affordable housing in our community, and I know that's a goal of this commission. I think if they aren't going to provide any parking, couldn't some of these apartments be low to mod? Or they're building to the lowest lead level. Why not require them to build to the highest lead level? Set the bar a little higher, which would take us a step closer to the city's environmental goals. On the IRB policy criteria, they did talk about all the community organizations they support and help. And what Frank said, of course, is true. We met with the board, and they said they had no choice. They had no money to fix their building. They had to go for this deal. And what they've done to the Social Service League building is wonderful. But they had to be tweaked. We had to come to city commissioners and say, hey, they're not doing anything. Would you please call them and ask them to get off the dime? Then when it went over and the Social Service League had to stay in their, temporary quarters, they asked the Social Service League to pony up 3 months' rent, which of course the Social Service League didn't have. Yes, they support them, but no, they don't support them. That just needs to be on the public record. One of the things they say is that their project will enhance downtown by adding density, but truthfully, this is creating a lot of problems for downtown. Yes, it's dense, but dense with no parking. Let's see. I wonder, will the cleaning crew be making that $35,000 a year, or will they be just contractees making minimum wage or a little bit above? I just wanted to ask. And finally, it's really interesting in the application at the end, it says the estimated sales tax savings, which is backwards. It's actually loss to the city, county, and the state. These are tax dollars we'll be losing. and we have some pretty serious social service needs in our community. So why do we continue to give incentives to multimillionaires when we need these taxes in our community? Thank you.
Questions? Other public comment? Anyone else? Okay, back to the commission. Questions, comments?
I'd be happy to start if you'd like.
Please, Commissioner.
Just a couple things that I'll address. First of all, I think the first thing that comes out, and I know we don't want to have our conversation about parking this evening. We've made it clear that we will have that conversation in the future, but I think an aspect of that conversation has to be had. If I'm doing my math right, which is a highly risky thing to say, we're looking at 55 units, 23 studios, 16 one-bed, 16 two-bed. I add that up as 71 beds. Is that correct? Or the studios are one bed, is that correct? Okay. So I add that up as 71 beds. KT, I like your comment if they're lucky enough to have a boyfriend or girlfriend. But so presumably we have at minimum of 71 people. You know, potentially there's a multiplier there. And so, you know, you're talking about 71 vehicles, presumably, and 8 spots. That's a problem. That's not necessarily related in any way to the IRBs, though. I think it needs to be noted that that's a problem. A lot of times IRBs are requested for infill, as was pointed out by Mr. Fleming's presentation. They're requested for infill specifically because parking costs can be so prohibitive. I get that. When we talked about I believe it was the Marriott, where there was some incentive money given for the purposes of an underground garage. That makes sense. In infill, you have to have parking, and so the government's going to subsidize for the creation of this parking. But there's not a single dollar of this subsidy that's going towards parking. Not a single dollar of it. So we've identified that a problem exists. We're throwing a bunch of money at the problem, but we're not actually addressing the problem. That, to me, is a problem. Secondly, and actually, again, Mr. Fleming's PowerPoint brought this out, IRBs have been used historically quite often for senior housing. In fact, I think I sat in this room not as an elected commissioner, but just as a excited participant and watched the night that you granted IRBs to Pioneer Ridge. And, you know, that would be an example of senior housing. I find it really hard to believe, just in my experience with seniors, that there's going to be a lot of people excited about the concept of walking several blocks to get to their car when they're elderly. I don't see this as being in any way a senior housing development. So that brings us to the next question. Is it an affordable housing development, which would also have a benefit to the city? At $1,200 for a 2-bedroom rent, this is in no way near affordable housing. That comes to $600 a bedroom. I own a property management company myself. We own single-family homes. Obviously, it's not infill development. I get that. But I don't have a single property, not a single one, that's that expensive per bedroom. So this, I would say, may exceed market rate. If not market, it's certainly not affordable. There's no benefit to the community there. They're welcome to charge whatever they want in rent. They're welcome to make as much money as they want in rent. But I think if we're handing out sales tax incentives, there ought to be a community benefit. Which brings us to the last possible way there could be a community benefit. When we talk about infill, we particularly talk about blighted areas. The Eldridge, for instance, received an IRB because we looked at the Eldridge expansion and we said, here's a pile of rocks that's been here for 40 years. We'd kind of like to see it be something other than a pile of rocks at some point. So an IRB was granted. When we talk about the Pachamamas building, we're not talking about a pile of rocks. In fact, 7 months ago, this was one of the most elite restaurants in Lawrence, Kansas. So to call that a blighted area, I think might be a wee bit of a stretch. Finally, and I understand the way the code's written, that there is not a but-for clause for IRBs. But the reality is this, you know, to use a poker analogy, they've shown their hand. They've said that they're going to build regardless. So if we vote to issue the IRB, essentially what we're saying is we know you're going to build it either way, but hey, here's $316,658 for really no reason. Granted, some of that is not ours. Some of it's the city of Lawrence, or a very small portion of that's the city of Lawrence, but ultimately it's still an amount of sales tax that will be generated for the state of Kansas, and we have pretty good, reasonable expectation that it's going to be generated regardless of whether or not we issue the IRB. I don't see a whole lot of reason to issue it.
Okay.
I agree with Matthew. Or Commissioner Herbert. Sorry, I keep saying first names tonight. Sorry, guys.
Okay.
Well, I'm real interested in infill development. I think in the review of Horizon 2020, one of the low areas of the current plan is infill development. It's really important for our city, with our tax base, to try to maximize the property tax dollars per every foot of street and every foot of sewer. Infill development is also more environmentally sustainable than building the same equivalent units on the outside of town. One of the things that we also have to look at is the extension of fire and police services. That is something that has cost to the city when we go further and further out. I think Lawrence needs to consider how we can balance historic preservation with growing up. And that's a key topic, I think, that we're going to have to address the next several years. But in this situation, there is no but-for clause. The applicant has chosen to commit to contribute $75,000 to the Affordable Housing Trust Fund, and that's a very important goal of our commission that, frankly, we did not fund in our 2016 budget. So for those reasons, I'm in favor of the application.
Okay.
Yeah, I would just have to ditto on what Stuart said. The leads, building to lead standards, I think, is extremely important, something we haven't emphasized enough in Lawrence. And the $75,000 housing, the money for the housing is to me the icing on the cake on that. And that's money that's going to go directly, I believe, in a lump sum amount to the project. So for that reason, I'm for it. And the infill too, also. So.
Is building to the lead going to happen with or without the IRB?
It could.
You know, both sides of this bring up, pretty important points. But let me give you a little bit of history lesson, okay? I've spent a lifetime, an adult lifetime on this commission. And, one of the reasons that I ran, I think in 1983, was we had been faced with suburban shopping, as it was, and a cornfield mall at the time. I think that's what Bill brought up a little while ago. And one of the things that was important to me is to make sure that as I look at downtown and the importance of having a strong downtown, being able to do things that made sense, to be able to build up, to be able to have more density in downtown, to be able to have people live in the downtown area, be able to provide, be able to support the businesses that sell goods and services that, important to their needs and obviously the needs of other residents of our community. But just the fact that we have an identity that's really kind of defined by our downtown and being able to do things that are important. Commissioner Herbert, am I concerned about the parking? Absolutely. I am absolutely concerned about the parking. But the truth of the matter is when you stop and look back through time, we had a number of businesses big businesses in downtown that left for a number of reasons. We used to have Mop and Tour downtown, a big business. My wife worked at Mop and Tour, had a great number of employees, and we were dealing, I think, with about 2/3 less parking than we are today. Reuter, Oregon, who provided a lot of its own parking, but had a great number of people. And KT, you know better than anybody, there was a lot of people that worked at Reuter, Oregon, that I'm sure parked in other places that had an effect on the neighborhood in East Lawrence. We had the same thing with Allen Press, provided a lot of great jobs for a lot of families, in this community, but probably obviously helped a lot of problems with parking problems that we have in and around. But, we were able to get through that time, and, our downtown has become stronger and stronger, and it's something that I'll continue to support. as I look at this thing, and Matt, you're right, you're absolutely right, the amount of total sales tax is $316,658. Our part of the deal is $74,325,000. You know, as somebody like yourself and as other members of this commission, we're trying to come up with ways to figure out how to help with affordable housing. I think it's a kind gesture. Are there other things that we can attach to this? There probably are, but this is kind of a wash the way I see it, you know, for the city of Lawrence financially. Can the state use the money? Yeah. I don't know how much, say the state has in, you know, the way that their money's considered. I don't think any. Once we wave the wand over it, it's, you know, pretty much the decision is made. I think in this particular case, at this particular time, this project is good for the community, but I think that we must have that session to be able to talk about parking and public incentives. And KT, I'm here to tell you, if we want to talk about the, you know, a plan that we look at Vermont Street and you know, New Hampshire, that's fine. Bill, we need to have the discussion about that grocery store building. We need to have that. And we need to make sure that we have a grocery store at the side of the Borders building. We absolutely have to. I think that that is key. We can't put all these people down here and think that they can't have a place to go buy groceries. So we need to have that discussion also. And that's serious.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And if apartments are going to be on that grocery store building, I would like to see them potentially go to affordable housing, some of them affordable housing.
Well, that'd be good. You bet. Okay.
Mike, I agree with everything you said. I don't think we should kill the project because of parking. I just pointed out as a concern. I guess the one thing I just ask all four of you to think about before you vote is what part of all the goodness in this won't happen if you don't give the IRB? I mean, the good parts of this project happen with or without that IRB. He said himself it's going to happen with or without.
Matthew, you're right. You know, Bill did get up here and say that they're going to do it. Here's the deal. We do have a policy. You know, we have a written policy that says that we want people to look at these kind of projects in our downtown. They're following our process, you know, it's written out there. One of the things that I want the commission to have the opportunity to say, okay, if we're going to make some changes, let's talk about this. Are things going to be done differently in the future? Yeah, maybe they are. But, you know, right now, my plan is to move ahead on this one, okay? Anything else? Okay. The item then is before us is to consider adoption of resolution number 7135. Were there other items that we wanted to have conditions placed in this? Lisa, you brought up something about the LEED certification?
Yeah, I think it was going to be after.
It's part of the resolution, isn't it?
Part of the resolution.
We don't currently have that in the resolution of intent there, but if that's something that the commission would like to add, and you know, if there's any other requirements such as the $75,000, then it would be appropriate to include that in the motion as an addition to the resolution, and then what we'll do is make sure that language gets added prior to the mayor signing.
Okay.
Yeah.
Anything else we want to add? Okay. If not, I would entertain a motion to adopt resolution number 7135 as amended with the LEED certification and the $75,000. Mr. Fleming?
I just need to make a point of clarification on the LEED certification. It's designed to meet LEED requirements, but it's not LEED certified. It's an important distinction that I want to make sure that everybody understands so there's no confusion about that.
Yep.
I think Ms. Commissioner Larson understands that, but I want to make sure everybody understands that.
Sure.
That's what your policy requires. It's either LEED certified or designed to meet LEED certification.
So Lisa, what are we requiring in our resolution?
Well, they use just a standard format that they use to make sure they're going through all the process, each of the items, and then they have to sign off on that, or at least you get.
And so you
We're
want
happy
that
to do
report
that.
then?
Yeah.
Okay.
We would suggest language that would be something that would be an architect certification that the project would meet meet LEED certification requirements.
That's fine.
Is that, yeah, okay.
Okay.
So, make that motion.
Motion to adopt resolution number 7135 as amended to include the language about LEED certification.
And this, yeah, it's 75.
Okay, and then the $75,000 to the housing fund. Okay? Okay, entertaining that motion.
That's, I move.
Second.
Motion made and second for adoption was made by Commissioner Boley, second by Commissioner Larson. All in favor of that motion, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed?
Nay.
Passes 3-2. Commissioner Herbert, Vice Mayor Soden in opposition. Okay, next item on the agenda is to consider the appeal of the Historic Resources Commission determination per section 20-308G of the Land Development Code for the installation of a metal arch associated with the sidewalk dining area located in the public right-of-way adjacent to 1012 Massachusetts Street.
Good evening, Mayor, Commissioners. Randy Larkin with the City Attorney's Office. We are hearing an appeal from the Historic Resources Commission. In so doing, you sit in a quasi-judicial capacity, so it's necessary to, before we have the hearing, to disclose ex parte communications so that everybody has the same information from which to make a decision.
Lisa, do you have any ex parte communication?
No, nothing on this subject?
Yeah.
No, not
I don't think I got
Yeah.
any correspondence.
I haven't had any at all.
Okay. I don't know if we've had any appeals before, but just to give you an outline as to what your role is, you'll basically be stepping into the shoes of the Historic Resources Commission, reviewing the evidence, applying the downtown design guidelines to the proposed project, and then make your decision. So if you have any questions, I'm here.
Questions? Okay, don't go away.
So Lynn Braddock-Zollner, Historic Resources Administrator for the city, and the good news is we've had such a wonderful discussion about downtown and the importance of our downtown, and particularly Massachusetts Street. And then with Randy's short information on what your role is this evening, I can cut my presentation short. So with that, I'll begin. This is it's really an appeal to the City Commission from the HRC denial of the project. The project is to install an arch associated with the sidewalk dining railing at 1012 Massachusetts Street. The arch will be located in the city of right-of-way, as is the sidewalk dining railing that exists today. Here's an aerial, and the black outline shows the property. Most of you may remember it. As you can see in this view, it was Buffalo Wild Wings, and now it is Jazz, a Louisiana Kitchen. This appeal is being made at the request of Dick Allred on behalf of Jazz, a Louisiana Kitchen. The Historic Resources Commission did deny the installation, and just want to quickly give you a feeling of the property that exists today. This is the main view. And then a couple of sidewalk views to let you see the wonderful new railing they installed, and also the additional sign, the new signage that was approved by staff for the new restaurant. And then this is looking back toward the north. This is the arch that the applicant is proposing to install adjacent to the sidewalk dining railing. They were working on some of the railing and had the arch available, and they didn't install it, they just put it up so that staff and the Historic Resources Commission could see what the final product would be if the arch were allowed to be installed. So just brief background on urban conservation overlay districts. They're actually in the development code, is what entitles and establishes the goals and the parameters for each district. The downtown urban conservation overlay district is actually, and the downtown design guidelines that go along with that was actually a long process of community meetings that set specific goals defined by the community for what they wanted downtown Lawrence to be. And if you've had a chance to see those downtown design guidelines, they're pretty comprehensive, and they deal with everything from changes to the architectural character, the way the streets are laid out, to sidewalk dining. Just a couple of quick goals that are in the downtown design guidelines, and mostly I just wanted to highlight kind of the overall feeling that the community had when they were putting these design guidelines together at those public meetings. And that's a little bit of the information we were talking about early. Preserving the existing character and the fabric of downtown, new construction that actually complements the historic character and or is compatible with the existing architectural character. One of the things that the guidelines address and that we hear often in our public meetings is how Lawrence has a unique identity, specifically downtown. Most of the time you hear people, if they've been to Lawrence, they say, what a great downtown. And as Ms. Director McCullough likes to say, that really didn't happen by accident. It took the vision of previous city commissions and previous community activists and actual members of the community to try to find a way to preserve that downtown character. So the process for review for applications that come in for review under the downtown design guidelines is initially there's a staff review, and staff uses the downtown design guidelines and the proposed project, and we try to find a way to make the project work and meet the goals of the downtown design guidelines while at the same time meeting the objective or goals of the property or the applicant. If staff can't approve the project, then staff writes a letter to the applicant stating why the project cannot be approved and outlines the appeal process, which is to the Historic Resources Commission. The Historic Resources Commission then uses those same set of design guidelines and makes a determination whether they are of the opinion that the project meets the design guidelines. If the Historic Resources Commission can't approve the project, then the applicant has the ability to appeal to the City Commission. It's important to note that the City Commission is the final decision-making authority in determining if a proposed project meets the adopted design guidelines. These are some locations of Jazz Louisiana Kitchen that staff found on the website, just pointing out that there are several locations. Some of them have the existing arch as part of their branding or their exterior development, and then some do not. Several are in more suburban developments as opposed to downtown urban cores like the city of Lawrence. The decision-making criteria, I pulled some of this out of the design guidelines to kind of give you a background of what you're looking at. As Randy mentioned, you'll be using the same set of design guidelines that staff and the Historic Resources Commission used. Part of the important part to determining whether or not a project meets the guidelines is to go back to those overall goals of the downtown design guidelines. And so, when looking at this, you really need to look at those goals. They're located in Part 1. Goals 2, 3, and 5 are specific to that historic character that we're trying to protect. The purpose and goals of sidewalk dining areas are in Part 3. There's an entire section for sidewalk dining. And when the guidelines were revisited several years ago, one of the main additions to the downtown design guidelines is this section on sidewalk dining. At the time, we had several public meetings and a very engaged citizenry that was concerned about the proliferation of sidewalk dining areas and how to make sure that they did not impact the character of downtown. So it's important to note, though, in the downtown design guidelines, there is also a section of review principles and applicability that states that a project doesn't have to meet all of the guidelines to meet the intent of the guidelines, and that the guidelines should be used as a collective document, and when reviewing projects, you should look not at those independent statements, but at the intent of the overall document. The original staff determination for denial, I believe that information was in your packet as well. The big issues for staff were specifically those standards for the sidewalk dining areas, and that one of the main things to look at was to maintain the maximum visual access. And this is a little bit of strange wording, and just wanted to let you know when the design guidelines were being developed for this section, one of the concerns was that when you look up and down Massachusetts Street, that you want to be able to have that visual appearance of what our streetscape looks like. And so when we were talking about heights of railings, there was actually a limitation to railing heights, so that from the average eye level, you really don't see those barriers, you just see straight down that streetscape. The other one for staff was that while the proposal includes wrought iron, that it's very lovely, it does not reflect the character of the area. And so for staff, these were the reasons for the initial denial. When the HRC reviewed the project, they also found that it did not meet the intent of the downtown design guidelines, and that it didn't reflect the historic character of the district. Of concern that one of the commissioners brought out was that, and I believe the letter is in your packet, that one of the intents of the applicant is that when you glance at the patio, you immediately think of the French Quarter. And I think for the Historic Resources Commission, when they have individuals that live here or visit here, look down Massachusetts Street, they don't really want people to think about going to the French Quarter. They would rather them think about going to downtown Lawrence and our really unique downtown area. So the staff recommendation is that staff is of the opinion the proposed arch does not meet the intent of the goals and guidelines of the downtown design guidelines. The arch does not maintain or enhance the unique identity of downtown Lawrence, and it does not reflect the character of the district. Again, as Randy mentioned, this is an appeal of the HRC denial of the project, and the City Commission should use the same downtown design guidelines and make a determination whether the installation meets the intent of the downtown design guidelines. In the determination, as you're discussing this and when you make your final decision, the Commission should specifically identify how the project meets or does not meet the downtown design guidelines. And that is because, the next step, should the applicant appeal, would actually be, I believe, to district court. Let me make sure that's correct. 30 days after the City Commission's final decision, any person aggrieved by the decision may file an action in district court to determine the reasonableness of the decision. So staff would recommend that you be very deliberate in your decision to make the determination either for or to deny the proposed project. And with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Questions of Lynn? Do you have one, Lisa? I guess
Thank
not.
you.
The applicant is here this evening?
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, gentlemen, and gentlelady of the commission. I'm grateful to be here today. My name is Vic Allred, and I'm the owner of Jazz Louisiana Kitchen. I have a prepared statement, which you all have copies of, that I'd like to read. I'm writing in reference to the planned patio arch that would be attached to the patio fencing outside of 1012 Massachusetts Street, the former Buffalo Wild Wings location. This space has been leased by Jazz Louisiana Kitchen, best described as a French Quarter Cafe, a full-service restaurant and bar serving the finest in Cajun Creole cuisine, with locations in Kansas City, Lubbock, Texas, Columbia, Missouri, and Omaha, Nebraska. Decorative wrought iron is a large part of the decor and the theme of our restaurants. Similar to the French Quarter, the exterior fencing is decorative and artistic in nature, The arch that has been proposed is attached to the fencing surrounding the patio. It provides a gateway into the restaurant entry area where the customer is transported to the sights, sounds, and smells of New Orleans. The gateway, coupled with a decorative remake of the patio fencing, is an essential part of the patio design. It is beautifully crafted with artistic iron castings and is a considerable upgrade over the existing fencing. As I look up and down the street and review the denial letter provided by the HRC, I find it impossible not to view the upgrades that we have done, particularly what was a previously approved storefront, to the building as greatly enhancing the storefront and that of Massachusetts Street. I would argue that items 2, 3, and 5 have been met and actually have exceeded the expectations of the existing area, particularly with our neighbors to the south and to the north. I would equally argue that 4.4 has been met as the archway is made of ornamental wrought iron and meets the qualifications of the rule. Lastly, I would argue, and this is the most important, is that the archway is not a railing or a fence as described in the denial. It is an arch designed to be a gateway to and from the entrance of the restaurant. A railing or a fence is designed to be a barrier to either keep something in or prevent something from entering. The arch is simply does not fit the description of fencing or railing. In fact, it is exactly the opposite. Therefore, the language of 4.4, I believe, is being applied incorrectly. In conclusion, I respectfully and prayerfully request that a waiver for any height issues be granted. The beauty of the patio fencing, archway, and wrought iron furniture is a perfect design complement to the red brick facade of the building. It's landlord approved. It will be reasonable to glance at the patio and think of the French Quarter, exactly the effect that we desire, while preserving the ornamental nature of historic Massachusetts Street. I will give you three exhibits. And the first one shows the condition of the railing when we first took it over. And you can see the yellow and black just posts. We removed basically half of those and then brought in ornamental castings to make that just a lot more impressive of a fence and add to the ornamental nature of the building. And then I would say the second one which you already saw also in Lynn's presentation is the actual arch itself. Is a piece of art. It has already been crafted. We put it up there just so she could see it. But it's kind of, that picture is kind of not really representative of what it is because it doesn't show how it's connected to the actual patio railing. And lastly, the third one is a current picture of the front of the restaurant. So you can see that the arch would just sit right in and be congruent with the actual physical railing that is there. So I would argue that the archway is not a fence. It's not a barrier. In fact, it is just the opposite of that. So we believe that we have met all the requirements through the application process. And we believe that this not only is a beautiful piece of work, but we believe it enhances historic Mass Street. I mean, we're very happy to be here. We've spent a considerable amount of resources to build out that store. I employ over 40 people at that location. Now, that location was empty for over 8 months before we came in. There was no revenue being generated by the city or the state or the county, and now we've remedied that. And so again, I would respectfully ask, because I believe, unfortunately, that the code does not actually accurately reflect any of the legal description of an arch. And therefore, I believe it is being applied incorrectly, and I would ask for a variance on that. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Questions? Yeah, no.
I realize this isn't the permanent installation of the archway here. You said it would be a little different tied into the railing.
Correct.
When it is permanently tied in, will it in any way restrict north-south flow on Massachusetts for pedestrian flow? Obviously not.
No, absolutely not. It's exactly congruent with the face of the rail.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Other questions? Okay. Don't go away, Vic.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Public comment. Frank? Oh.
Good evening, Commissioners. Dennis Brown, President of the Lawrence Preservation Alliance. I was at the HRC meeting where this agenda item was deliberated and gave testimony at that meeting for the LPA. And the HRC did vote unanimously to deny this application, feeling that it doesn't meet the downtown design guidelines and is not compatible with the existing character of our downtown historic district. Dining enclosures, I think they're going on about 20 years now in downtown. And I remember how it started, at first one or two, and then it seemed like within a year or two, everybody had to have one. And I think that's instructive when we consider changes to our policy here, or allowing an exception or a waiver. The fact that everybody had to have one. And the design guidelines for the dining enclosures were actually, it was a very long process initiated by the City Commission and involving a lot of members of the public. I think it probably took over a year to really get that ironed out to where these other dining enclosures could come along and follow the first one or two that happened. And, you know, I think the process actually worked out pretty well. What's happened over time is basically a level playing field where everybody has certain sets of guidelines, railing heights, the square foot of the enclosures based on their frontage of the property. And I don't know that anyone really has one advantage over another. It seems like a fairly democratic process that has happened. This is something a little different, where an enhanced structural entry is meant to draw attention to this particular location over another. It's a beautiful arch. Guidelines don't really relate to art and beauty. They relate to heights and mass and scale and setbacks. Art really isn't something that the HRC is going to concern themselves about when they're looking at guidelines. If this was to go through, what would be the consequences in terms of what other folks would want? I think staff's point to the visual aspect, you have a railing that's about like so, and then all of a sudden here's an arch like so. It happens one time. Well, that violates the guidelines according to HRC. If it happens 5 times or 10 times or 20 times, I could see a real issue with what's happening with our downtown historic district. Our downtown design guidelines for sidewalk dining enclosures are working well, and there's no need to tip the balance. We welcome this restaurant to our city, wish them all the success. But their success or failure isn't going to depend on whether they can install this archway or not. It's a solution that maybe doesn't have a problem, but would that solution cause us a problem? I think the thing to do, and LPA would urge the City Commission to stand by the unanimous decision that was reached by the Historic Resources Commission.
Thanks, Des.
Can I see that photograph you got? The one of the arch in front of the... This is what I saw on the screen. I guess you say it's behind the railing, is that correct? Not in front of the railing?
Frank, talk to us, please.
My name is Frank Jansen, East Lawrence. I walked downtown in 10 minutes, and I know the guidelines, and I've actually been confronting people at BurgerFi who had their that little sign out in front of the railing, and I said, no, you can't do that. The law is you have to keep it behind the railing. Anything outside the railing is in the right-of-way, and so this, I guess that's behind the railing. The issue has to do with, as we're referring to as Mr. Chad Lawhorn, who is perhaps the 6th city commissioner, has said the same thing that the speaker just said. Once this goes in to the restaurant there, everybody up and down the street's going to want the same thing. They'll be here every night to get us another arch. Thanks.
Other public comment? Any other public comment on this item? Okay.
I would just like to point out that I definitely disagree with the gentleman who said that art should not be considered. You make exceptions all the time to wonderful art that's put all over the city, and particularly down the street. This is no different. This is a beautiful piece of ornamental wrought iron. It's a piece of art. It is what it is. I apologize that the scope and complexity of my problem today is not comparable to some of the great things that we've listened to today, but this is an issue. It's part of our concept, you know, and I wouldn't want to try to determine myself whether, because arches are a big part of our concept, and wrought iron is a big part of our concept, and I wouldn't want to try to determine if that is singularly going to keep us from having success or not. I think that's an irrelevant comment. However, I think that the artistic value of this piece of art is much warranted in the discussion, and I'll leave it at that unless there's any other questions.
Any other questions? Okay, thanks.
Thank you.
Any other public comment?
K2 Walsh, this is an interesting crossover then. Perhaps the Director of Arts and Culture needs to weigh in on this, or it needs to go through that process. Also, I love New Orleans. New Orleans, God, they've done an amazing job with historic preservation. They were the first, as far as I know, you know, to get on it. And the reason New Orleans is awesome is because it's authentic. And the reason Lawrence is awesome is because it's authentic. We're not New Orleans, we're Lawrence. I think the archway is beautiful, but I agree with the Lawrence Preservation Alliance. I think it needs to go inside the restaurant. Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Back to the commission.
Why not? I'm on a losing streak tonight. Here we go. Let's go for 3. If I read the tea leaves, this will make me 0 for 3 on the night. 2 comments I'd make. About 2 hours ago, I sat in this chair and watched us give approval to put a manufacturing facility in the middle of a neighborhood, but now we're going to tell a guy he can't put an archway in front of his business. Wow. When I think of downtown, I think downtown is wonderful, and I think downtown is great. But when I think of downtown, I don't think of guidelines. I think of what I actually see. And there's 2 things that I want to say. First of all, you know, I wish Buffalo Wild Wings the utmost success at their new location. And having been there, I think they're having the utmost success at their new location. But I'm really glad they're not downtown anymore, because Buffalo Wild Wings, to me, is not downtown Lawrence. There's nothing historic. You know, we talk about downtown. It's the #1 tourist destination in Kansas. Nobody's coming for Buffalo Wild Wings, right? And so, you know, they have 840 restaurants across the United States. So, Mr. Allred, I honestly applaud you. I appreciate your investment in downtown Lawrence. I'm glad that you're there. I'm glad that Jazz is there and not Buffalo Wild Wings. Let's call it what it is. I think you fit better there than a 840 chain restaurant. And quite frankly, it doesn't obstruct pedestrian walkway in any way, shape, or form. Not one bit. And so, you know, if we're willing to put a manufacturing facility in the middle of a residential neighborhood, but we're about to tell Mr. Allred he can't hang up an ornamental piece of art in front of his business, you want to talk about why Lawrence gets that rap of being anti-business? Here it is. Here it is, right here. We have a guy investing in downtown in a facility that was vacant for 8 months. He wants to put up an ornamental piece of art, and you know, that we're voting potentially not to let him do that. It was mentioned Chad Lawhorn's our 6th city commissioner. Well, let's talk about Chad Lawhorn. He wrote an article where he talked about the massive vacancy rate in downtown Lawrence. I tried to find it a minute ago. It was 28.5%. Thank you for filling a vacancy in downtown Lawrence, and I appreciate you being here. And I look forward to supporting you this evening.
Okay. Anyone else?
I do agree with the concept that this could create a precedent. You know, downtown Lawrence, as mentioned, is important because it is authentic. So I find that to be a very compelling argument to not have the arch, but I thank you for coming here and opening up your restaurant.
Okay.
You know, I do think it is art. I think it's a beautiful arch. I really do. And I would go with Matthew in saying, you know, if we're going to put a manufacturing plant in a facility in our neighborhood, why can't we let this guy have some art?
Okay. Stuart, you got anything?
I have to side with the Historic Resources Commission. I respect the work they do. I think they've called this one right.
Okay. Randy, where'd you go? Randy. So again, tell us, okay, we got to put on the shoes of the Historic Resources Commission, right?
Correct. You basically step into the shoes of the Historic Resources. They just made a decision. You make a decision. You're not bound by their recommendation. So what you would do is apply the downtown guidelines to this project. If you believe it's within the intent of the guidelines, then you should approve the project. If you think it's outside the intent of the guidelines, then you should deny.
Okay, so then if I see that there's a situation here where the height restriction between 36 and 45 inches is a standard here, but if I want to look at the arch as being something other than an arch, is that outside what the HRC had to deal with? I'm trying to find reason to be able to support this and be able to meet the requirements that you're placing on us.
If you believe it's a railing or a boundary, it's 36 inches, and if you believe it's not, then it may not apply. Those, I mean, it's for the city commission, for you guys to determine what those guidelines mean.
Do you think that archway is going to stop you from entering that building?
I doubt it.
I'd say it's not a railing then.
Or a barrier.
Or a barrier.
Yeah. Is that what this is down to?
It could be, yes, yes.
Okay. Well, I guess the thing that I look at, and I do want to thank you for your investment in downtown, and I have the greatest respect for the Lawrence Preservation Alliance and Dennis Brown. I mean, I absolutely do. This is one of those times where I may have a difference of opinion. If it was something that jutted out and would stop, you know, the progress of foot traffic up and down, I may have concern. You know, I don't see people coming down here lining up and wanting to do this. I really don't. But if so, then maybe there's something to be said about our ordinance. But anyway, I don't think that this impedes me from going in there. I really don't. So, and I do appreciate the work that our HRC does also.
If I may, Mayor, in your deliberations and specifically in your motion, would you please include how you think the project meets the design guidelines so that if there is an appeal to district court, we have that documented for the record?
Okay, and the appeal of the district to the district court comes from anyone?
It just says any person aggrieved by the decision.
Okay.
Sir, if I may, I have no intention of filing a lawsuit if you don't let me have my arch.
Thank you. Okay, we're back to the commission then.
That's two guys tonight that have showed their cards.
Anyway. Okay, so we got to talk about how it meets the guidelines or how it does not.
See, I think it adds to the uniqueness of downtown. As
Yeah.
folks are talking about New Orleans and so forth. I think it adds to it.
I think, I think if we want to argue semantics, if this thing gets to court somehow, I think it's a pretty easy, in my opinion, I'm not an attorney, but I think it's a pretty easy argument to be made that this is not a barrier and it's not a railing. No archway is going to stop me from entering, exiting, or jumping up and down.
Commissioner Boley brings up a point in the information that was presented to us by Mr. Allred. In the last paragraph on the first page, he states that the arch simply does not fit the description of fencing or railing. In fact, it is exactly the opposite. Therefore, the language of 4.4 is being applied incorrectly. So that's basically it. Thank you.
Mayor, if I may interject, because I think an important point of this discussion is that we have applied that standard consistently throughout downtown sidewalk dining to produce the outcome you see as you walk downtown. I think one of the implications in your decision tonight is that, we will view your direction as guidance to how we view the downtown guidelines. And so future applications that come in with any kind of verticality at the gateway feature, as a gateway feature, can have this verticality taller than this 36 to 42 range. And I think we have real concern that you will start seeing a different character downtown than what we have consistently practiced over time.
What you're saying is it's going to affect the street view as you walk down the street.
Well, I think what you're going to see is right now we have a very low railing and gate entryway on the public right-of-way. And it is the public right-of-way. It's not on private property. And so, I understand that it's a great project, by the way. It's a beautiful restaurant inside and out. But the sidewalk dining really needs to be viewed as a complete system downtown. That's why we have standards in terms of material and height and how you enter and what materials. We go down to the utensils and type of glass out on the sidewalk. So my point is that over time we have used the guidelines to produce the outcomes that don't have verticality at the entrance as is proposed. If you want that downtown, then I think this tells staff, well, let's start approving those permit requests for things. If it's at the gateway entrance to the sidewalk dining area, then don't view it as a railing. And then the guide goes up, I'm not sure how tall, because we use that 36 to 42 range now, and this exceeds that guideline. So the HRC has been charged with looking at it sort of as a system view, not a specific project, but in context of how we have practiced years' worth of developing sidewalk dining downtown.
If I could just make a comment, sir.
Sure, please.
There are many awnings that have been approved, and an awning starts from the storefront and then extends out, perhaps even as far as the patio area. This is only about 1 1/4 inches thick. So as it goes up vertically, the awnings that have been approved are far more restrictive in terms of the sight line up and down the street than this small 1 1/4 inch thick archway will be.
That what?
Got a good point.
It does.
Well, an awning is for the weather. It's not the same thing. No offense.
But that's not the argument. The argument is the sight line, whether it's for the weather or not.
The awning is to keep the sun out of my eyes in the afternoon.
The awning is so that people can walk downtown when it's raining or snowing and protect them. It's not the same as an arch.
All right. Okay, so if we give direction to make this change, you're going to apply this new change to every new request that comes along, correct?
Well, I think that's the implication, that as our final decision body on what the guidelines say and how they should be interpreted, it has implications for future projects.
Okay. I'm gonna, I gotta think about this. No. I'll be a better thinker if I defer this item.
Dennis has a comment if you want.
Dennis,
to go.
please. No, but go ahead.
I mean, it was open.
Go ahead.
awnings are a traditional historic part of our downtown for years and years. Scott is making my point better than I did. I think we could really be opening up our sidewalk enclosure guidelines to where they actually just have to be revised, and some pretty significant visual, not barrier, visual changes to our historic downtown Main Street.
Thanks, Dennis.
Are you interested in deferring it to develop standards instead
No, I'm
of
interested
setting a
in
precedent?
deferring it, and I'm interested in deferring it so I can study it further.
Let's defer.
I just don't want to create a monster for staff. But this gentleman should be allowed to have, some form of artsy arts. I believe that, but anyway.
Would it have the same effect if you put that arch right up against the building?
No, because I mean, it's designed.
Yeah.
I mean, it would require structural changes, modifications. And then it would also hit against the sign, which is neon.
Okay. Yeah, with,
And then it would also restrict the flow between the patio.
yeah, thank you. Would the commission feel comfortable in granting me a week's deferral of this item?
Yes.
The final decision? Okay.
Sure.
I would make a motion to defer this item for 1 week.
Second. Take your pick.
Okay. Motion made and second for deferral. We will get back to you next week. We'll finish this up, I promise.
Appreciate the consideration.
You bet. It's made by Amick, second by Vice Mayor Soden. All in favor of the motion to defer, aye?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 5-0. Thank you all. Thank you. Next item on the agenda is the Star Communities Briefing and Energy Efficient Retrofit Proposal.
Thank you, Commissioners. We just go. Oh, there's a fireplace. That was not my presentation. Sorry for the slow start. Again, my name is Eileen Horn. I'm the Sustainability Coordinator for the city and the county. I know many of you individually, but I'm excited to get to present to you all as a unit for the first time, so thank you for the opportunity. I have 3 reasons to be in front of you this evening. First, to kind of introduce you all and talk a little bit about our sustainability priorities. Second, to talk about our STAR certification process and what that will look like and answer any questions you all may have about that sustainability rating system. And third, to talk to you about some of our ideas related to an energy efficiency retrofit program that we'd like you to authorize us to pursue. But I know it's been a long night, so if you only remember one thing from my presentation, know that I am firmly committed to helping us beat the city of Wichita in their STAR certification. So just know that. Okay. So first, I just wanted to take a second to give a brief overview to the concept of sustainability. When we talk about sustainability, I think we often default to talking about environmental sustainability and environmental quality and preservation. But here in the city and the county, we're trying to look holistically at sustainability and including a vibrant economy and also a just and equitable society. So the STAR certification that we're going to be pursuing looks at this more holistic view of sustainability. I'm really excited that we'll be tackling it from that perspective. And this is a slide from a presentation I give to the public when I talk about why we as a local government are engaged in sustainability and how we work in this space. And, as you all know, you all set policy so we can, impact people's lives and their ability to achieve sustainability goals with policy, but we can also engage the community, we can educate them, and then we can also show leadership, which is what our energy efficiency project is about tonight, which is taking care of our own buildings and facilities and setting a good example in those. Here's just a quick list of the key guiding documents. Many of you are likely familiar with these, but just as a refresher, these are many of the documents that outline our goals as a community related to greenhouse gas emissions reduction, our solid waste reduction targets, our multimodal plans that have mode shifts away from carbon-intensive transportation. And so all of these touch on sustainability and have plans and goals outlined for us as a community. So my role as sustainability coordinator is to work with departments across these different areas. And we really try to work and look for those triple wins that hit the triple bottom line of sustainability. So energy efficiency and conservation is a great one because it saves money, which is a good economic opportunity. It preserves environmental quality because it reduces greenhouse gas emissions, and it can help create a more just society, as low-income people are often most impacted by utility bills. So that's a good example, but we do a lot of work in local food systems as well, and that has a lot of the triple bottom line value also. And so what I do as sustainability coordinator really runs the gamut of all of those projects. But some examples of things that we're working on this year, we'll be working with the MPO on a bike share feasibility study. So part of the role is to study what are other cities doing, what are really great innovations we can copy. Implementing projects, so that's a picture of our one of our Common Ground community garden sites. So we've had that, that's a community garden program on city-owned properties that's been in existence for the past 4 years. I often partner with departments to write grants and bring in resources. So that's a solar PV system on the Prairie Park Nature Center that we partnered with Parks and Rec to receive a Westar grant to fund. I also monitor Energy Cap, which is our energy tracking for all of our city buildings, facilities, and vehicles, and then work with communications staff to help share the story of what we're doing with citizens. And so if you have any questions about any of these initiatives, all of that can be found at our webpage. So I've been in this position for 5 years, and the goals that created the position initially were, it was a different city commission, I was actually the same county commission, but the goals that were set out in that initial kind of writing of my position and of the sustainability direction, they may have changed at this point, and so I want to take an opportunity to kind of check in with you all, check in with the community, check in with our departments to ensure that we're still pursuing the goals that you all would like to see us pursue and that are relevant and important at the time, which leads us to the STAR Communities tool. So STAR Communities stands for Sustainability Tools for Assessing and Rating Communities, and it's a way for us to set goals as a community, measure our progress towards sustainability, and then and ensure that we're reaching those goals. So it's a tool that is administered by a third-party 501c3 independent nonprofit. It's similar to how the U.S. Green Building Council administers the LEED program that you all were talking about earlier. So how LEED is a rating system that rates individual buildings, STAR is a rating system that rates cities. This was developed by several organizations, including the National League of Cities and the U.S. Green Building Council and others who are really knowledgeable in this area. And it was also developed in concert with cities and counties. So it's a comprehensive framework, and what it results in is a certification. So we go through the entire STAR framework, we measure 516 indicators, and we submit for certification, and then we end up with a rating for the community. So thus far, with 516 indicators, it's a really rigorous process, and it takes cities often up to a year to achieve. So the program has been around for 5 years, and thus far, about 38 communities that are with the Green Star have gone all the way through the process and certified. As you can see in our region, Wichita beat us to it by like 6 months, so they're ahead of us in the process, but I think we can catch up. And then in our cohort this time that are pursuing STAR at the same time as us are also Kansas City, Missouri, and Columbia, Missouri. So we have some peers in the region that we're collaborating with as well. So that kind of shows you the scope of cities and counties that are participating in STAR. So the certification levels that we'll be aiming for, it's a 5-star system, and it's based on points, and basically how well you do on all of these metrics that you report on. And then these are the cities who have achieved ratings thus far. So it's really hard to get a 5-star rating. And it's really only, the best of the best. And it's meant to be that. It's meant to be really difficult so that we all have something to strive towards. But as you can see, a lot of our peer communities that we benchmark against for other reasons, are on these lists. And also many in the region as well. So, one of the things that's surprising is Portland, Oregon, which is often, seen as one of the key leaders in sustainability, received a 4-star, if that gives you any idea of how difficult it is. But I think we'll do well. We've dug into the rating system thus far and have already started to map out areas that I think we'll do quite well in. And just to give you a sense of what the rating system looks like, it is, again, that holistic look at sustainability. So there are 7 goal areas ranging from built environment, climate and energy, to equity and empowerment, health and safety. It's really that holistic view of sustainability. And so within each of these 7 goal areas, there are outcomes and actions that we will be tracking and measuring. So for example, an outcome might be that X% of people in Lawrence are healthy, and our county health rankings might be an outcome that we're tracked against. But then there are actions that we do as a community in terms of numbers of trails, trail mileage, and rec centers, et cetera, that can be actions that help support. So we'll be collecting data in these areas over the next year to help inform the rating system. So really the benefits that I see for us undertaking this progress is that it allows us to benchmark ourselves against peers. What we often find when we're talking about sustainability in cities and counties is we talk about projects and programs, and we tout all the really great projects that we're doing, but it's hard to know, are we really moving the needle? Are we really making progress? And I think benchmarking ourselves against our peers will help us understand what are the national best practices that other cities are doing and how are we measuring up on that scale. So I think it will help us identify areas that we're leading in, areas for improvement, and then also it'll, I think, help us be able to communicate our progress to citizens more readily, to be able to say, hey, we're a 3-star community, we were this close to 4-star, or whatever the case may be. And I think it'll allow us to communicate with citizens about our progress and gain national recognition for our efforts, which is also important. Selfishly for me, I'm really looking forward to kind of being a 5-year reset button on the position as well. The Sustainability Coordinator position was created initially out of energy efficiency and conservation block grant funding. So it's had a very energy efficiency focus to the position, which is still something I work on. And also because of the interest in local food systems from the County Commission, I've spent a lot of time on local food systems. So I feel good about those areas in the STAR rating system and others that we've made great progress on. But I'm excited to see what else is out there and what our peer communities are doing that we might not have even thought of, or might be very close to achieving. And so I think it'll be a really great process for us to go through as a city. So the way the process works is that we're in this reporting phase right now that's highlighted in the white text. We'll be reporting for 6 months to a year. So we're currently building a team of staff and local partners, and then gathering data based on the requirements in the technical guide. Next week, we have some technical assistance that was granted to us as part of this program. So there's a team coming next week that will be helping us host meetings, and we're having focus groups on all of the content areas. So there will be numerous staff and community partners present at those meetings to help us figure out where we can find all of this data that we need to collect. So we have over 60 community stakeholders right now engaged in those meetings, and I think it'll be some really great conversations about how we're doing in all of these areas and how we measure up. So I'll pause there for questions before I go on to the energy efficiency program.
Questions?
So is this as a county? Since you work for both city and county, so it'll be countywide?
Some of the data sets are county, some are city, and we looked at actually doing all of the cities within Douglas County, but that would be like doing the 516 indicators times 3. So maybe if you all were interested in funding a large sustainability department, we could consider doing that. But I think right now we're gonna focus on the city of Lawrence, but a lot of the data sets are county level data sets, so we'll be collecting really great data for the county as well, but focused on the city.
Okay. Other questions? Okay.
Okay.
Keep going.
So the item that is before you in the memo I provided is related to a comprehensive energy efficiency retrofit program. So just a quick review of the current situation in city facilities. We have about 450 electric meters, and we have them on streetlights and buildings. We have extensive utility usage throughout the city, and what we do is we track that on Energy Cap, which is a software that allows us to pull in data from all of our water meters, our natural gas meters, and our electricity meters, and we also gather data on all of our fleet fuels. So we have a comprehensive look at what are our utilities and what is our usage in all of our city facilities. So staff use that to ID opportunities as they can. Oh, thanks. So staff utilize Energy Cap to identify opportunities as they can. What they do is they look at that data and they look for billing anomalies, they look for usage anomalies, and so we catch a lot of things that way, and we also can then identify what are our most expensive buildings on a cost per square foot, and we can then invest smartly in energy efficiency opportunities there. But what that ends up doing, because we have an annual budget cycle, and often energy efficiency pays for itself over time in the energy savings on the utility bills, it's hard to invest in the upfront costs of energy efficient equipment. We've done a great job as a city on LED lighting. So we look for opportunities wherever we can to retrofit lights to LEDs because they have a quick payback and they're relatively inexpensive compared to other equipment. But we often then kind of defer the longer term projects like HVAC projects because they're very expensive, and often the return on investment for the Energy Star version or the more is sometimes 10 plus years, but the equipment might be a 20-year piece of equipment. So what that has led us to do is bring this memo before you today. We really need to take a comprehensive look at our buildings and assess them to figure out what are our key opportunities for energy efficiency that have a smart return on investment and will also help us meet our greenhouse gas emission reduction goals and our energy use reduction goals. And as you know, when a lot of these energy efficiency upgrades also have great maintenance savings. LED lights don't need to be changed nearly as often. And so in addition to the energy savings, I also anticipate seeing some maintenance savings with these projects. But what we're proposing and asking for your authorization is to allow us to release a request for qualifications to find an energy assessment firm, energy management firm, who would do a comprehensive assessment, not of all of our facilities, but to ask departments to maybe highlight, their top 5 to 10 facilities that we would look at, do a comprehensive energy investment grade audit, which is the highest level of audit on those buildings, and then I'm really into like the 5-year plan thing right now, but create a 5-year energy efficiency plan for us as a city so we can know each year as budget comes up what needs to be paid for, maybe through the CIP, through equipment reserve, or what do we need to think about financing long term. But we can't have those conversations until we have the data and know how to invest. So that's what we'd like to move forward on with your approval.
Questions?
Is it time for comments or just questions?
Time for questions. Diane? Sounds like a neat idea. Are we ready to take this on, and can we afford to take this on?
Well, I think as Eileen indicates in one of our slides, a lot of times the energy efficiency projects result in savings that then can be used to kind of pay for the project. I think what we've talked about internally is opportunities to finance that internally, and I think the data that we would get from a report would help us be able to lay that out and look for those opportunities, but also to quantify those so we know what we're dealing with, that we could then have those considerations by the City Commission in the budget process. So I think, again, these things would be competing with other priorities that you all have and other projects that we need to look at. But, we probably will not be making any additional progress unless we have good data on which to make decisions, because we really kind of have hit a lot of the low-hanging fruit. And we have done those things financed internally to this point.
Anyone else? Public comment. Thanks, Eileen.
Oh, sure.
Any public comment? Okay, back to the commission.
Well,
Now
I
it's time for comment.
I remember, I don't know if it was our first or second city commission meeting, me as a city commissioner, pulled off of the claims, the $250,000 payment that we were doing for Westar that time, and just, you know, blurted out basically, what are we doing? Dragged Chuck up there. I knew Chuck could answer the questions appropriately. I had faith in Chuck. But this is just a continuation of that. You know, this is something that beats very close to my heart. So I'm very interested in anything that we can do. And I think it's important for the city government to be a leader as well in things like this. And I mean, yeah, so I think it's going to be awesome.
Okay.
Mike, I'm looking at you sweat over there. I got some low-hanging fruit. I think we ought to unplug that space heater. That's where we can start our energy conservation.
Well, it's actually barely
it is
ran
100
tonight,
degrees up
so
here.
that is not our fault. It's barely ran today.
Okay. Thanks, Commissioner.
You bet.
I don't know.
It's real money right there.
It is nice and balmy in here for a change.
Balmy.
That's a word for it.
That's right.
It's not on right now.
It's just
Oh, I guess it's
blowing,
just barely.
but it's
Okay.
not.
Anybody else
Anyways.
have comments about this?
You know, I do want to say the space heater conversation that we're having that no one out there in TV land understands is that we have frozen behind here for months now, and so we finally got a space
Careful with
heater.
the we part.
That's right.
Because we asked for it, not that I didn't know to ask for one, so we have it, which is great. But it certainly points to the age of our facilities and that they are not built for today's standards. It reminds me of an article just the other day that was out that said something like most thermostat policies are set at for men, which is like 60-some degrees. So
Yep.
I don't, it's not
Did it
breaking
just
on our
blow
first
up?
night. So I think it's really important to finally address these bigger ones with our facilities.
And so this energy management is going to come back and say, turn it off,
Yeah, well, hopefully that could be a goal.
layer up.
I don't.
Okay.
I do agree with Leslie that we need to take the lead on this. Government does. And I know they have been in some areas, but I've talked to Eileen before, and I'm all for this. We really need to move hard and strong on this.
Okay. Eileen, I want you to know my question of Diane was not to question your recommendation at all, but just to make sure that we're all on the same page, and it sounds like we are. Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say I appreciate the work that's been done to this point. And sounds like we need more data to be able to move forward in a reasonable way, and that's what we need to get.
And we have to beat Wichita.
Starts with you. That space heater.
Okay. The item that is before us then is to authorize staff to issue a request for qualifications, an RFQ to select an energy management company to assist city staff with the energy analysis and calculations of savings and project implementation.
So moved.
Okay.
Second.
A motion made and second to authorize staff to make that issue. It was made by Vice Mayor Soden, second by Commissioner Larson. Any other questions or comments? All in favor, aye?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? It passes 5-0. Thank you all. Thanks, Eileen. Future agenda items.
The meeting next week, we have the South Point development that will be in front of you for consideration. We also have the city auditor with several items for your consideration. And then rezoning that you see there, a site plan appeal, and then of course we'll have the Jazz Kitchen item back on that agenda as well. I did also want to just point out one of the consent agenda items that you see there is a request for qualifications for architectural design services for the remodel of Fire Station 1. So this project is in the 2015 Capital Improvements Program for the design. So we're a little bit late with getting this off the ground, but we were working also with the county on possible participation by them in the design service contract at the same ratio that they contribute toward fire services. So I just wanted to foreshadow that, and then we'll need to talk about once that design is done, financing any construction activities that we may want to do at a later date. And then on the 15th, you have several presentations there that you will note on economic development. The chamber will be here to talk about that. We have a staff presentation related to the capital improvements program and that process that we would like to share with you and get your feedback on that process so that we can kind of begin that work early next year. And then there is a request from the Lawrence Douglas County Housing Authority related to the acquisition of that property at 1725 New Hampshire Street. And that will be back before this body for consideration. And then you can see we added an item related to the Eldridge Hotel shoring permit. And you know, unless it's resolved by the parties, this was something that was based on the direction that you all provided several weeks ago on that item.
Diane?
Yes.
On December 15th, it says on the consent agenda, boundary ordinance. What is that?
Every year, we are required by state statute, I think, to publish a boundary ordinance, which is just all of the boundaries of all the property that is in the city limits. So it's a very lengthy legal description, multiple pages. Don't want to necessarily read it verbatim, but it does outline what our boundaries are, and it's something that we always have on a December meeting for you all to approve.
I see.
Have we had any annexations this year?
We did.
No, we haven't. I didn't think we did.
I thought we approved one like a month ago.
Over by Free State High School and...
We initiated the process.
Yeah.
Okay.
We haven't gotten there yet.
Oh, I see. I see.
Me too.
Yeah. Oh, there's a push. We need to get that done, right?
Not this month.
Not this one. Okay. The item from the Housing Authority on the acquisition of 1725 New Hampshire Street has kind of been, you know, the juggling ball. And you all want to hear that item?
We
Yeah.
have to, don't we?
Yeah.
I'm just asking.
Yeah.
Just making sure.
I think we have to.
What?
They need an answer.
Oh, I know. Got it. Just wanted to make for sure. Okay.
Do we have the 18th today?
Yeah, we will. Let's have that discussion. On the 18th, we now know the time that we have to be, or hold our executive session beginning at 12 o'clock noon, correct?
Yes,
Okay.
correct.
That
You bet.
works in your
You bet.
time frame?
I'll be here.
Stuart, that works in your time frame?
It's gonna work.
Okay. Everybody else? It works for you and your
Do you
appointment?
have
Okay.
a end of time on that?
We'll, I think you have a,
Well, I just need to know, I mean, that's all.
no, we don't at this point.
Okay, as soon as we
will-
get one, I'd appreciate you finding
Yeah.
out.
We'll definitely identify that, and that'll also be, of course, in your agenda on the 15th. You'll have a recess for that carries over to the 18th, and that'll have that time in there as well.
Okay. Okay, then commission items?
Yes, I do have one. And pardon my brief preface on this to give you a little explanation of where this is coming from. But my very first day on the job, when I met with, at the time, City Manager Corliss, and we went through the budget line by line, the first thing that ever jumped out at me as an aha moment was City of Lawrence spends more money enforcing downtown parking than we make on downtown parking tickets. And I thought, that's a very strange thing, you know? And so I've spent the last 7 months basically trying to figure out a solution to that. And don't worry, Mike, I'm not going to recommend spiking the ticket price here on you. But what I've noticed some other communities have done, particularly around holiday times, is they've offered alternatives to paying, their $3 ticket could be a donation to a food bank. And a lot of communities do that, but they do it only around holiday times. And the reality is that hunger in our community is not seasonal. It's not specific to Christmas or specific to Thanksgiving. And so what I would like to propose, and obviously this would have to come before the whole body, but I would like to propose that we look at as an alternative, not as a get rid of the parking tickets completely, but as an alternative form of payment, providing the option to individuals to make food donations to local food banks as an alternative to their $3 parking ticket. As it stands now, parking tickets are not a revenue generator for us, they're a revenue loss. And so I don't see that it would hurt us in terms of a budgetary situation, and I think it could be a great thing for our community and those in hunger. So I would offer that up as a future, hopefully, agenda item to be discussed.
And you want to have that discussed this holiday season?
Well, that's the thing. I don't want it to be tied to holidays. I want this to be a program.
Okay, good. We can do this right after the first of the year then?
You bet. No arches involved.
Thanks. Okay. Diane, if you could provide to us, I know that there was a memo recently, but if you could provide to us all of the revenue commitments that we have from the parking meter fund and tickets and everything that goes to help, I know, pay for the courts and everything else. So if you could just give us all that information to see what kind of effect that would have on our budget, I'd like to have that.
Well, definitely.
Okay. Okay. Thanks, Matthew.
If there are other communities that do this, it might be interesting to know what other communities' experience have been. So if you can reach out and try to identify some of the places, that I think would be a good idea. Sure.
Yeah, from what I've read doing research on this, there's a lot of communities that do it, but every single one I've read about ties it specifically to like a holiday. Let's do a Thanksgiving food drive, so every ticket from November 1 to November. And to me, that's kind of a shallow approach when, hunger's a year-round thing.
Okay. Sure. Yeah. Okay. Any other commission items? Okay. Do you have some?
I just want to give a shout out to all the folks that work and volunteer at Lawrence Memorial Hospital. Our community is really fortunate to have a wonderful hospital as we do. The reason that it's as good as it is because the people there are skilled, they care about what they do, they work hard, and because the community supports them. And I just want to say thanks.
I was out there yesterday morning, as a matter of fact. Yeah. Okay. Any other commission items? Okay. Meeting calendars.
So a couple things I just want to make sure to draw attention to. Again, your candidate reception and then that executive session that you all mentioned. And note that the December 22nd meeting is canceled, but we will have a December 29th commission meeting that will be at 9 a.m. And typically, we've had that really limited to bill payment, minor consent items and things like that, so.
There won't be a regular agenda.
We'll be able to make it a tip-off that night, huh?
Yeah, right.
Good.
A pretty brief one.
That is the meeting also that if we have commissioners that are out of town, would they be able to participate by telephone also?
Yes, we can make those arrangements, so if you have those needs, just let us know, and like I said, it's usually about 5-minute meeting or something. It's pretty short.
Yeah, I'll be here, so I'll be working.
Yeah. Okay.
I should be here.
Okay. Well, if one of you or two of you were going to be gone, I mean, we do have that opportunity to do that on that meeting, so just make sure that was available. Tomorrow, the investor update, that's tomorrow afternoon, 4 to 6.
For the EDC.
Okay. Okay, got it. Anything else? Entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Second.
Motion made and second to adjourn, made by Commissioner Sutton, second by Commissioner Larson. All in favor, aye? Aye. Opposed? We're adjourned. Thank you. KT, did you lose a jacket a couple weeks ago?
No,
That wasn't yours?
That was one of your clients.
Yeah, well, I've got the jacket still. I just